All right, I think we've got everyone we need. Ms. Rivers, good afternoon. Are you able to hear us?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon.
Great, good afternoon. We will get started then. So our first calendar involves Mr. Ratliff, who we'll bring out in a moment. This has some connection to gangs because Mr. Hiles was involved. Mr. Ratliff has a bunch of cases for which he was on probation. And I know the state has filed a petition to revoke Mr. Ratliff's first offender status. I'll get more on the record when he's out here. Ms. Wood, are you ready to go forward on behalf of Mr. Ratliff?
I'm ready, Judge.
Okay. And Mr. Jordan, you know enough about the state's angle on this that you're ready to represent the state?
Yes, Your Honor.
Great. Then let's bring them out, please. Do you want them at the podium or do you want to be seated at the table? I'm fine.
I can do it at the podium.
Okay,
I was just going to ask if we could take care of Mr. Johnson's matter very briefly.
sure.
It's just that I'm going to request to have the bench warrant set aside.
Okay, tell me his case number.
It's 23 SC 186651. He was on the April 24th plea and arraignment calendar.
Okay, and didn't make it here. Let me look at a couple things. So it wasn't an old case. Why are we setting aside the bench warrant?
I'm requesting the bench warrant be set aside, Judge. He informed me when he got in touch with me yesterday, the address that's listed with the clerk's office left off his apartment number. That's why notice did not come through.
Got it.
I have
Okay, so the Cascade, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Ms. Nelson just flagged this for me. So the Cascade Road address is the right street address minus an apartment, so notice wouldn't know what to do with it.
Yes, Judge.
Okay, so you've got a updated address form?
I just sent it to Ms. Nelson. I also just filed the waiver of arraignment.
Excellent. So we'll do a scheduling order. Mr. Jordan, any objection to me lifting the bench warrant or the failure to appear warrant in Mr. Johnson's case?
State has no objection, Your Honor.
Okay, the scheduling order will come out. You'll get discovery to Ms. Wood and we'll move things along. So Mr. Johnson, give me the 4 digits of your street address.
4365.
Okay.
Apartment H1.
Okay, excellent. We'll get that apartment's not in there. That'll get added to it and then you'll get notice. More importantly, make sure you stay in touch with Ms. Wood about your whereabouts if you're moving or something like that, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
You're welcome. All right, so Ms. Nelson, we will set aside the bench warrant or the FTA in Mr. Johnson's case.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Now we'll get on the record in the cases of State versus Ari Ratliff. Good afternoon, Mr. Ratliff. How are you?
And you, sir?
I'm okay. We tried to do this once before, but you were being housed in Oconee and we could not get through to the staff there to try to do a virtual connection. So you'd be on a screen. And the production order we had done was to get you here from Rice Street because we didn't know you had been transferred to Oconee County. My understanding is that you're now in Rockdale.
No, I'm at Fulton County.
Oh, you're back. Welcome home.
Judge.
Okay. All right. Well, Mr. Ratliff, the state has filed a series of petitions. It's more than one because you have 4 cases for which you were on probation, seeking to revoke your first offender status and have you resentenced in each of those cases. At one point in talking with your lawyer, Ms. Wood, and one of the prosecutors, it sounded like this was going to be contested and the state was going to need to prove some things up, which of course they're obligated to do if you're challenging it. But sometimes these things get worked out. And I think that's where we are, but I'm going to let Ms. Wood provide a setting from the defense side, and then I'll hear from Mr. Jordan and we'll go from there. Unless you want me to start with the state.
I can begin, Judge. You are correct. This has been a long path to get here. He was in Rockdale County. He resolved that case last week.
Oh, so Rockdale wasn't sheriff housing in a different place. There was a hold from Rockdale.
Correct, Judge.
Okay.
He was visiting Oconee as a holding place for Fulton, and then he was in Rockdale for his own matters there, Judge.
Okay.
Judge, we have talked to 88 Hiles at length about this case. I believe that we have reached a negotiated resolution for what is at stake here today. He will be admitting to the violations, and then I think where it's going to get tricky is the dates that I'm asking for credit for time served. Okay.
We've been navigating those kinds of things recently. Okay, so the warrants all allege the same conduct, which is that in May of last year, Mr. Ratliff committed an aggravated assault and had a gun as a first offender probationer in DeKalb County. So that's not Rockdale either. What's the status, as you understand it, of the DeKalb charges?
As I understand it, Judge, it's still an open pending case.
Okay, not dismissed, not indicted.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Mr. Jordan, do you have any other information about the DeKalb case?
I do not, Your Honor.
All right, so that's open and that's an aggravated assault. And for the purposes of resolving the 4 probation warrants / petitions, Ms. Wood, Mr. Ratliff is admitting that he was arrested for aggravated assault and possession of a firearm, or is he admitting he in fact had a gun, set aside the ag assault?
We're admitting to the arrest, Judge.
Okay. All right. What were the charges in Rockdale?
Judge, I apologize. His attorney there was George Prothro. I've talked to him several times and I'm blanking on it. Mr. Brown?
Terrorist threat and harassing phone calls.
Okay. And is that something that's resolved in the sense that Mr. Ratliff, you pled to it or it got dismissed, or what happened recently in Rockdale?
I took a 5-year probation plea.
Okay. 5 years probation. I assume not as a first offender.
No, sir.
Okay. Harassing calls. All right. So you will be, when you get out, eventually you will be on probation through that case. Are there other open cases that you're aware of, Ms. Wood? We've got the 4 Fulton ones. DeKalb is open, not even charged yet. And then Rockdale, in a sense, is closed, but it's probation.
I don't know of anything other than the DeKalb matters at this point, Judge.
Okay. And tell me what you think the negotiated disposition is, assuming that I find, which I think I will, that Mr. Ratliff violated the terms of his probation by getting arrested in DeKalb County for aggravated assault and possession of a firearm. And if that fell apart, I assume the state would trot in here saying, hey, he just pled guilty to terroristic threats and harassing calls. And we may want to weave that in some way if that's been negotiated so that there's not a new round of warrants for Mr. Ratliff as a result of that. But tell me what you think is happening.
I think that we are admitting and taking 10 serve 3 with credit for the time that he's been in. If my math is nearly correct, I believe it's a total of 643 days combined based on several different jailings, Judge. He's 26 years old. He is a high school graduate from Frederick Douglass High School. His mother is here. He has a girlfriend here and his child is here as well, Judge. Part of the negotiation with the state is that a parenting class be taken, as well as, I believe, anger management.
Yes.
Anger management as well, Judge. We think that will really benefit him once he is done with these cases to get back into society and be productive. He was working at the Frito-Lay warehouse prior to these arrests. He is a lifelong Atlanta resident. He has a stable address he can return to. In Decatur, Judge, we would just ask that you accept the state's recommendation.
So these would be resentencings in the 4 cases that would be the essence of the revocation, is that it would be revoking the first offender status, resentence. Now it's a little less of a procedural blow to Mr. Ratliff because he does have an adult felony conviction out of Rockdale. And then across all three cases, the recommendation is the 10 served 3, credit for time served. I'll let you get those dates in the record, and then balance probated.
Yes, Judge.
Okay, got it. Let me look up one thing. So I've got an apartment on Candler Road. Is that the address we're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Ironically, it's the same apartment number as Mr. Johnson, just different location. Okay, got it. Mr. Jordan, tell me what you want to share.
Yes, Your Honor. I believe that Ms. Wood has been pretty accurate about the discussions with Mr. Hiles. I also did want to include that Mr. Hiles had on his petition, along with the aggravated assault and possession of firearm by first offender probationer, he also had an October 12th of 2022 incident, which was a possession of firearm by first offender probationer, sale of marijuana, and theft by receiving. He included that incident report as an exhibit in his petition.
Okay, I see that, and you're right. When I was sharing with Mr. Ratliff what I thought our foundation was looking at the warrants that I signed. This case is a little different than what we usually see because the state followed up behind with its own petition, and it does list the October 2022 situation in DeKalb, as well as the May 2022 situation, which is what's on the warrant. So I will certainly, this will involve both those, and I'll make clear on the record, I'm deeming this as having addressed the Rockdale case as well, so that this closes things out, if you will, for Mr. Ratliff. And he'd need to get a new case to have probation issues going forward.
Understood, Your Honor. And also ADA Hiles indicated that along with the anger management class and the parenting class, the special conditions of probation be that Mr. Ratliff have no contact with any gang members, no participation in gang activity, and that he have no weapons or replicas of weapons. And Your Honor, I believe that's it from the state's position. I think it's pretty clear that these were first offender pleas that the state is asking to be revoked. And I only have 3 petitions here, Your Honor. I spoke with ADA Hiles about the 4th case. I think we would absolutely love that to be roped in, but I don't know if he used his first offender on that one.
Well, we'll find out, but I want to close everything, get closure on all the things so we can look.
There's a 19 SC 172-341. I'm not sure if
That's on the
on
calendar.
the calendar.
Yeah. Let me look. I'm just going to look at one of the dispositions. It got revoked before.
I just wanted to make sure that all we were handling all things here, Your Honor.
Me
so
too.
Mr. Ratliff wouldn't have any lingering issues.
It's interesting. So I'll have to look that one up. The sentence in 19 SC 164317, which is a gang case, says it's concurrent with the 2 18 SC cases, 041 and 720. There's no mention of this other 19 SC. So let's look it up. SC 172341. That's not a first offender. So it was an armed robbery reduced to theft by receiving. It's a plea in front of Judge Kraus. Different lawyer. It was a conflict offender. It wasn't Mr. Prothero. Mr. Ratliff got 5 to serve 1. That 1 year was reduced to time served, balance probated. So that's not one where it would be appropriate to resentence to 10 serve 3, but we ought to handle the revocation. And so I'm going to take a little guidance from Ms. Wood in a minute about how much time Mr. Ratliff has served. I'll revoke more than what he served, but I don't want it to be something that, I guess if I revoke 3 years and it's all the same credit dates, then if there's even 3 years to revoke, may just be revoked to balance and close that case out.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, great. Ms. Tucson, can you tell me, please, how much time remains on 19 SC 172341?
No problem. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
He has 7 months and 20 days. That was from the last calendar we had.
Okay,
It's 7 months, 20 days.
that's going to make that one easy. Thank you so much.
No
Okay.
problem.
Mr. Ratliff, we've been talking about you. You've been listening quietly. Is there anything you want to add, or do you feel like you understand what's going on here?
I just want to say that I know I had plenty of chances to do better and whatever, but I just feel like if I was to get one more chance, and I'd be able to turn my life around. Cause my life changed on February 1st. My son, I just had my first son. I never seen him, but this is my first time ever being around him. I just feel like I shouldn't have to go to prison. I just don't want to leave my son. Like, I want to get another chance.
So I hear you, and you actually are getting another chance. It's not coming quite as soon as you want. I think your lawyer has negotiated a pretty reasonable outcome for you. When I was first talking with Mr. Hiles and Ms. Wood about this, Mr. Hiles was looking to have even bigger number. You will have an opportunity to be in your son's life and have a meaningful influence on his life. You're going to need to figure out between now and then what kind of influence that's going to be. If you are doing the kind of stuff that got you locked up in Rockdale and DeKalb and around guns and this and that, you'll see your kid from time to time, but he's not going to like what he sees. If you are in a position, and it's not easy, I don't know that you're in that position because life is complicated, but if you're in a position to go about things in a different way than you have in the early years of your life, then maybe you can be around your son and be a positive influence on him. I hope that's what you want to do. You clearly want to be staring at him. But we're going to move forward here. And my hope is that you get out level-headed, more clear-headed, and want to be there, not just for your son, but for his mom and your mom. They're here for you. They've been in court before. They were here on that day. We couldn't connect with you virtually. And I could see they were pretty anxious to get to the bottom of what's going on. And what's been going on is, you know what's been going on. You're the one who picked up all these cases. You're 26, and we're going to take care of 4 cases today. You took care of a 5th case in Rockdale, and you've got maybe 2 open cases in DeKalb. You got to stop collecting this stuff, because one of them is going to leave a mark where you're like, I'll see my kid when he's shaving and he's graduated from high school. And then you weren't his dad, were you? You were some guy who was down the road while he grew up. You control which way you go. You're old enough now where they're your choices. It's not your peers making you get in the car and roll in a certain way. You decide what car you get in, and you need to think about it, because it carries the consequences for the little guy. What's his name?
Here's my name.
Here's your name. All right. Well, let's hope that's a name that he wants to keep. Mr. Ratliff, I find that you did violate the terms and conditions of your probation in 18 SC 160720, 19 SC 164317, and 18 SC 162041. You were on first offender probation in each of those 3 cases. I think it is appropriate to revoke that first offender status and resentence you in those cases. I need to get the indictments in front of me so I can make sure I'm structuring the sentence the right way. I'm going to follow the recommendation, so there's no need to worry about that. Let's start with 18 SC 160720. All right, in that case, I'm resentencing you, and your sentences to count one, which was theft by receiving stolen property, is 10 years to serve. So I'm going to step back from that. Your sentence in that is 8 years to serve 3 years, with the balance on probation. You'll get credit for time you've served. Ms. Wood, when we wrap this up, make sure you get on the record the time. I recognize I said 8 and not 10. I think that Mr. Ratliff, with 5 additional years of probation, will let us know pretty early on in those 5 years if he wants to be meaningfully present in his son's life and his son's mother's life, et cetera. And rather than have 7 years probation and we're having to get back together again and again, 5 years is more than enough. And I'm comfortable with that as the window of time that we'll be supervising Mr. Ratliff. So count one is 8 years to serve 3, balance probated. Count 2 is a misdemeanor. It's 12 months to serve. And that takes care of the case ending in 720. In 18 SC 162041. Oh, you had a bunch of co-defendants. In that case, it was 1 count of sale of marijuana, and that's count 1. The other counts were for the other defendants. I will sentence you to a term of 8 years to serve 3 years, having revoked your first offender status. You'll get credit for time you've served, and the balance will be probated. Forgot to mention it in the other case, but these will be your special conditions in all your cases. You'll need to complete a parenting course and an anger management course, and you'll need to have no contact with known gang members. I think that subsumes gang activities because it wouldn't be a gang activity if you're doing it by yourself. So no contact with known gang members. And that gets us to the last of the 3 cases, which is 317. All right, that case was 6 counts. I don't know the range for some of these gang counts. So I don't need to know it to structure the sentence, but a little bit in the dark on that. Let's see, 164317. All right, in 19 SC 164317, again, I'm revoking your first offender status, resentencing you, and in that case, your sentence will be count 1, 3 years to serve. Count 2 will be 8 years to serve 3, balance probated. Counts 3, 4, 5, and 6 will all be 3 years to serve. They'll all run concurrently with each other for a total sentence of 8 years to serve 3, balance probated. Again, credit for time served and those same special conditions of probation. Finally, in 19 SC 172341, due to your arrest in DeKalb County in May of last year for aggravated assault, as well as your recent conviction in Rockdale County I am revoking the balance of your probation in that case. So that'll be closed out. And you will only have 3 cases in Fulton County. And I want to be clear for the record that I view this first offender probation, revocation, and resentencing as being predicated on 3 different violations of probation. One was an arrest in May of last year in DeKalb for aggravated assault and possession of a firearm by a first offender probationer. 2 is an arrest in DeKalb County in October of 2022 for possession of a firearm by a first offender probation, sale of marijuana, and theft by receiving. And 3 is your recent Rockdale County conviction for terroristic threats and acts and harassing calls. So all 3 of those are the basis for this revocation, and you ought not to be revoked in Fulton County for any of these 4 cases we've been talking about, for any of the conduct related to those 3 incidents. So just as a hypothetical, if you get indicted in DeKalb for one of those cases and you plead guilty to it, that's not a basis to revoke your probation in any of your Fulton cases. We've taken care of that today. Mr. Jordan, anything else from the state as to Mr. Ratliff?
Nothing further from the state, Judge.
All right. I'm going to hear from Ms. Wood in just a moment, but Ms. Tucson, do you need anything else from me to, I guess the only thing you're doing is the revocation order in the case ending in 341. Ms. Nelson will be doing new sentences in the other 3 cases.
Okay, that I was actually going to ask for clarification on that, because I was kind of writing them up as if I were to write orders on the other 3.
Yeah.
So basically, when I send it over to, the manager who does the sentencing and the sentence adjustments, those are basically going to go in as new dispositions, if I understand correctly. And then the revocation order on the 19 SC 172341.
Correct.
Okay.
Do you need any information from Mr. Ratliff?
I'm going to confirm what I have on file. Of course, when it was at the apartment H1.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yes. He would need to report to probation when he is released from custody, because he still has that Rockdale case he's on probation for.
Got it. Okay. Ms. Wood, why don't you get on the record what you think the windows of time for which Mr. Ratliff ought to get credit? I'm not guaranteeing that he will. Ms. Nelson will look into this and flag for me any concerns she has about those date ranges.
Yes, Judge, and I have explained that to Mr. Ratliff, so we understand. He has indicated to me that he has blocks of time since these cases in Douglas County, DeKalb, and Fulton. The ones that I have been able to confirm, I will put on the record now. First, in Fulton County Jail under booking number 1820201, it's 198 days from October the 4th, 2018 through April the 19th of 2019. The second block of time is under the booking number 1913745, July 15th, 2019 through December 28th, 2019 for 167 days. The next block of time is also in Fulton County Jail under booking number 2108570 from June 30th, 2021 until August 10th, 2021 for a total of 42 days. Next, another Fulton County Jail booking under number 2210780 from July 21st, 2022 to August 12th, 2022 for a total of 23 days. For DeKalb County Jail, according to their Odyssey booking screen, he was booked in from August the 12th, 2022 until August the 14th, 2022 for 2 days. And then again in DeKalb County Jail from October the 12th, 2022 until December the 9th, 2022 for a total of 58 days. And then finally from December the 9th, 2022 until the present for a total of 153 days under booking number 2218114. And I did send this to Ms. Nelson because I know it's a lot.
Sure. But those last 3 ranges, the 2, the 58 and the 150 something, those are all in DeKalb.
The first 2 are, and then the third one is for Fulton. Although he's been rocketing back and forth from Rockdale, it's showing as one booking in the screen.
Okay, got it. All right. Thank you for sharing that. Mr. Ratliff, I know you want to be with Ari Jr. now. It's not time yet, but boy, as I see how you've been bouncing between jails and this and that, you do have a chance to make a turn here for the young man. I hope you do. He needs you. His mom needs you. Your mom needs you. So if you're ready to step up, I bet they're ready to have you play that role in their lives that it doesn't seem like you have been playing before. In fact, I'm amazed that you have a girlfriend and a kid. I don't know when you had time to make a kid and have a girlfriend, given all these windows that Ms. Wood was laying out. He's in jail then, he's in jail then. But like I said, life is complicated. I don't think your decisions are easy to make. It is easy for me to sit here and say, hey, do the right thing. It's not easy to do the right thing, but you can. And I hope you do. All right. Mr. Jordan, thank you for stepping into Mr. Hiles's shoes. And thank you, Ms. Wood, for working with Mr. Ratliff on this.
Thank you, Judge.
All right. All right, I can sign your return or swear you in and do the return, and then we will go directly into Mr. Perez's situation. So if you're here for that, people can start moving over to council's table.
Thank you, Judge.
You bet. Sorry to keep you waiting. I got a little behind. Let me see what we got here. Mr. Kuntz. All right. So this was, you already had the phone, it was to extract it, or it was to?
Right, the phone was an APD evidence. They didn't put the language in their original warrant about the extraction.
Okay, got it. Okay. Do you swear or affirm that your return is true and correct to the best of your knowledge and ability?
Yes, I do.
All right. If you'll sign there, you're good to go.
Thank you, Judge.
You're welcome.
And Your Honor, I'm flying solo today. My investigator is actually in a training right now. Do you mind if I step outside briefly just to make sure that my two witnesses?
I don't. That's tough. They should get someone in here.
It would be nice.
All right. You're ready to get to your new assignment, no doubt.
Yes.
Thanks, Ms. Wood.
Thank you, Judge. See you tomorrow.
Okay. All right, Ms. Rivers, you ready to move forward with the suppression hearing?
Yes, ready.
Great.
Thank you, Your Honor. Both witnesses are present.
Great. So we're going to go on the record. This is case 22 SC 183482, State versus Jose Hernandez Perez. I'm going to swear in our interpreter. Good afternoon, Mr. Lares.
Good afternoon, Judge.
Do you swear or affirm that you will translate faithfully and to the best of your ability from English to Spanish and Spanish to English?
I do, Judge, to the best of my ability.
Thank you. We are here to work through a motion to suppress that Mr. Hernandez's lawyer has filed, which puts a burden on the state to prove that the stop in this case and any subsequent interaction with Mr. Hernandez were all constitutional. Mr. Jordan, I've read, well, let me get the appearances since our court reporter is remote. On behalf of the state, we have.
This is ADA Julian Jordan on behalf of the state.
And on behalf of Mr. Hernandez.
Michael DiTardo is associate of Kazuma Sonoda, attorney of record in this case.
All right, Mr. DiTardo, I've read your motion now several times because we've almost had this hearing several times. So I feel like I understand the allegations and the concerns. Mr. Jordan, is there anything you want to share? I guess what you are seeking to suppress would be obviously the drugs that were seized. And then what, in addition to that, the result of the interview?
There are some statements that I think I referenced it in the last paragraph of my motion, some statements that are made purportedly by my client to law enforcement, of which we have no recordings, but separate issue. But that's, yes, Judge, that's what we're asking for. Suppression of the drugs, suppression of the statements. I don't know if the state intends on trying to offer those statements, but I put it in there anyway.
Okay, but that's helpful to know. So I assume, Mr. Jordan, you'd want to use the drugs at trial. What about anything that Mr. Hernandez said to law enforcement during the course or after the traffic stop?
Your Honor, given that interview was not particularly fruitful, I would not be opposed to those statements being suppressed. The state would not intend on presenting them as evidence at trial regardless.
Okay, so I'm not going to suppress them, but what I'll do is deny the motion as moot. As to the statements, if something changes at trial and all of a sudden the state, because this defense would be free to get the statements in if they want to. But if you want to use them proactively, in other words, not in response to the defense getting the statement in under Rule 106, I think you'd be able to get in the rest of whatever was said if Mr. DiTardo or his colleague tried to get them in. But if you had a change of heart, we need to revisit that outside the presence of the jury. But I don't think then we need to explore with the officers whether Miranda was administered, was it in Spanish, was it signed, because the state's not planning on using any of that.
Yes, Your Honor.
Does that work for you, Mr. DiTardo?
It does, Judge.
Okay, so we'll focus then on the basis for the stop and whatever was done that enabled the police to find and seize the drugs.
And I'll make sure, Your Honor, with the full knowledge that I've probably won't, this may be the last court appearance that I have for this particular case. I'll make sure that whomever the state has going forward is aware that I have agreed as far as the statements go. About
It'll be in my order. So even if that person's not aware, someone who will be aware will say, gosh, Judge, you ruled in your motion in the order that suppressing the statements was moot because the state represented on the record in court that they would not be using them.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. If you want to call your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. And I'm sorry.
Well, I was just gonna bring it up as a matter of housekeeping. I don't know, Your Honor may recall, we provided you with a flash drive when we last convened.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
And if you didn't review it, that's fine. We were planning on putting some of it up in front of you anyway.
Okay.
Do you happen to still have that?
I do. I do. It's the Walgreens one.
Yeah,
I'm gonna get it.
Thank you, Judge.
1 second.
And Your Honor, I also have a jump drive if you just wanted to proceed forward with mine that I can give you after the proceeding.
That's fine. I was planning on trying to use would I be able to use your, how does the?
I'm gonna give you your Walgreens thumb drive. I may take both when we're over. But you gave it as a courtesy with no objection from the state. And I uncourteously didn't look at it before today. So let me go get it.
Yes, if I can have Detective James Renels, he should be there. I think he's in a polo. The other gentleman's in uniform, so it's gonna be the gentleman that's not in uniform.
How does your system work?
I will go to share from.
Laris,
You're on the Zoom.
Yes.
I got you. Okay, I need to do that. Okay.
I think Ms. Rivers was trying to get your attention.
Mr. Laris, I can hear you over council when you're translating.
She was saying that she can hear the translator.
You know, I can.
I can do.
This is her equipment, it's still over there.
Okay.
Ask if she can hear right now.
It can be separate.
All right, Ms. Rivers, are you able to hear Mr. Lares right now?
When he's speaking to the defendant, I can hear him over council.
Okay. Let me see if we can work that out prior to, well, I'll ask Judge McBurney about it.
Just 5 minutes.
Why don't you do that?
A couple of those, bring up and sit over there.
Great.
So
So Mr. Laris is gonna get the headset, so he'll sit in the jury box and then just be speaking through.
Okay.
How can I help you?
This is,
Oh, you're in the right place. You're Reynolds? Excellent. Yeah.
You can sit in the first row. We got some technical issues to work out.
So Ms. Rivers, we're gonna get equipment for Mr. Laris to be able to sit in the jury box. And as long as we confirm Mr. Hernandez can hear him, it'll be over a little microphone thing.
That's perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
June.
Okay. Where you going?
That's no problem. It was a great working with you as well. Sorry, I couldn't see it through.
That's okay. That's okay.
You can always plead it out right now, Mr. Jordan. You've seen it through.
I've given the best offer I can.
All right. I don't know if you noticed that guy, Mr. Griffin. So I had worked with him for a long time in drug court, and he hurt one of his fingers at work and had been infected. And he would always, and I'd say, "How's it doing?" And he'd hold it up and he's gone. He held up his hand and this is like, "Oh, I see what happened to it." Yeah.
Como un radiecito. Yo me voy a sentar allá para oír a todos bien. No me vas a oír por este radio. El volumen no es tan alto, sino que lo puedas escuchar. No tienes que cambiar esto. Ya te digo, ya, está todo bien. We're good to go. I'm going to sit over there.
Please, wherever works for you. And then let's make sure it's working. We'll get rolling.
Sí, sí, lo escucho. Sí.
Excellent. Okay. So we are now ready, Mr. Jordan, for you to call your first witness.
The state calls Detective James Rennell.
For the record, Judge, I'd like to invoke the rules of administration.
Got it. And so the record is clear. There are no other people in the courtroom. So we're good for now. If I see anyone else come in, I'll figure out who it is.
James Rennells, last name is spelled Reynells.
Good afternoon, Detective Rennell.
Good afternoon.
How are you employed?
I work with the Sandy Springs Police Department in the Narcotics and Vice Unit.
Okay, and how long have you been with that unit?
I've been with them for approximately 3 years, and I'm currently assigned to the DEA as a task force officer.
Okay. And what are part of your normal duties and responsibilities as a part of that unit?
The main objective of our unit is to investigate drug crimes that occur within the city of Sandy Springs.
Okay. And in January of 2022, did you begin an investigation from a tip that you received?
I did.
Okay. And particularly in the beginning of January, what information did you receive?
I was told that there was a taxi driver trafficking methamphetamine in the area of Northwood Drive and Roswell Road, which is within Fulton County and Sandy Springs, Georgia. And I was provided with a phone number for that person.
Okay, and do you recall what that phone number was?
Specifically, I'd have to refer my report if I
Okay.
can do that.
May he refer to his report, Your Honor?
He may, as long as Mr. Tardo has the same report, which I assume he does.
I do, Judge.
Great.
I think.
Well, we'll find out. Hopefully it's the same phone number.
The phone number I have is 213-218-7076.
Okay, and did you conduct any searches using that phone number?
Yes, sir. I researched that phone number and it was linked to a Mr. Jose M. Hernandez.
Okay, and what was your next step of that investigation?
I began to research Mr. Hernandez and discovered that he lived at 66 Northwood Drive in apartment 106, which is in Sandy Springs. And that also he was associated with a taxi company and that he potentially operated a Toyota RAV4 for his taxi.
Okay, and did you eventually conduct surveillance on his residence?
Yes, on January 13th, we found his vehicle at his address parked in front of the building. And then on January 24th, we conducted surveillance again on the vehicle.
Okay, and particularly on January 24th, what did you observe when you conducted that surveillance on that day?
Yes, sir. That afternoon, I observed Mr. Hernandez exit apartment 106 with a looked like a plastic grocery bag and put it in the back of the rear seats of the Toyota RAV4.
Okay. And after you witnessed Mr. Hernandez with that plastic bag, what did you do?
I relayed that information to the rest of our unit and to a canine handler, Cabrera, who was in the area.
What was you said K-9 unit, the thing before that?
The rest of our narcotics.
Got it. Rest of the unit.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And to your knowledge, or what did you specifically tell to K-9 handler Cabrera?
It wasn't specifically to him, would have been over the radio, that basically a male had exited the apartment, entered the RAV4 with a bag and was leaving the complex.
At that time, did you believe that that bag contained illegal narcotics?
Yes, sir. I suspected it did.
Okay. To your knowledge, was an officer able to pull over Mr. Hernandez's vehicle?
Yes, the canine handler Cabrera conducted a traffic stop on that vehicle on Northwood Drive near Roswell Road.
Okay. And did you yourself ever report to where the traffic stop occurred?
No, sir.
Okay. What was your involvement with the investigation following you seeing Mr. Hernandez leave his residence with the plastic bag?
So canine handler Cabrera conducted the traffic stop and he recovered drugs from the vehicle. And my involvement from there was to talk to Mr. Hernandez.
Did you talk to Mr. Hernandez at the scene of the stop, or was Mr. Hernandez taken into custody and you talked to him at the precinct?
So on Northwood Drive, there's a public storage facility, and he was taken to that facility where I talked to him.
Okay. So he was in custody. He just wasn't at a police station. He was.
Not at that point, sir.
Okay.
And I apologize if you stated this before. To your knowledge, what substances were found or believed to be substances that were found in Mr. Hernandez's vehicle?
So inside the white plastic grocery bag, there was an inner bag of like a blue shaving kit, it looked like. And inside that, there were 30 individual baggies of suspected narcotics. 27 of those baggies were suspected to be methamphetamine, and 3 of the baggies were suspected to be cocaine.
And did you yourself take out any warrants for Mr. Hernandez?
Yes, sir. Ultimately, I took out warrants for trafficking methamphetamine, possession with intent to distribute cocaine, and the traffic violation.
What was the traffic violation?
Failure to maintain lane, sir.
No further questions from the state, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Tardo, any questions for Detective Reynolds?
Yes, Judge. Detective Reynolds, pursuant to your involvement in this case, you prepared a written report, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Presumably you reviewed that report prior to testifying here today?
Yes,
Okay. So you testified earlier that you had received information in January of 2022 regarding some trafficking activity. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Do you remember which day in January that was?
No, I don't.
Okay. And you were asked regarding surveillance conducted upon my client, and you indicated that you conducted surveillance on January 13th and then January 24th. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Any other dates that you recall conducting surveillance upon my client?
No.
Okay. The information that you'd received was that there was a taxi driver trafficking methamphetamine in the Northwood area, Northwood Drive area of Sandy Springs, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then you were provided a phone number and you testified as to that phone number, correct?
That's correct.
You weren't told whether this taxi driver was male or female, were you?
No, sir, not that I recall.
Okay. You then testified about finding that my client was associated with that number. Through what methods were used to determine that?
Through open source databases that we have access to.
And what are the names of those?
I don't recall specifically, but commonly I use Accurate and Clear.
Okay. And have you ever had occasion to receive information off of Accurate and or Clear that later wound up being false?
I have had occasions where the information was maybe old or outdated. Yes.
Okay. And you indicated that on January 24th, that you observed my client emerge from his apartment holding a plastic baggie, correct?
Yes, sir, like a grocery bag.
Okay. Now, how did you know on January 24th that the male that you observed with that baggie was in fact the same Jose Hernandez that you had determined was associated with that number?
Based off seeing the person come out, Mr. Hernandez come out of the apartment and recognized him to be Mr. Hernandez.
And how did you know that that was Mr. Hernandez? Had you seen a photo of him prior to then?
I don't recall specifically, but I conduct research, and if he has a license, I'm sure he had a picture on his GCIC return.
Okay. You'd acknowledge that you didn't include ever seeing a photo of Mr. Hernandez anywhere in your report, correct?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Are you certain that you saw a photo of Mr. Hernandez prior to seeing him on the 24th, or are you speculating?
Am I 100% certain? No, I can't testify because I don't recall specifically doing that.
Okay.
But I want to explore a little bit. What I understood you to say here is when the gentleman came out of apartment, I wrote it down, 106,
Yes, sir.
with the white grocery bag in his hand. You didn't think maybe that's Jose Hernandez. You believed it to be so because you recognized him, not in the sense of, hey, that's my cousin, but I know that's what Jose Hernandez with that phone number looks like.
That's correct.
Okay, so what you're not remembering today is in what context you were able to link a photograph with that phone number. Maybe it's a driver's license, but you are confident to say, I knew when I saw the person holding the bag, that's the Jose Hernandez I've been thinking about in connection with being a cabbie and having this phone number.
Yes.
Okay.
And when you observed Mr. Hernandez on the 13th of January, what happened on that date? Anything of note?
Nothing to note. We just saw the taxi parked in front of that building. I didn't actually see him, I don't think.
Okay. Did you do any research to determine whether there were any other individuals residing in apartment 106 at that time?
I don't recall specifically, but that's my normal operation, yes.
Okay. In fact, did you later on search that apartment and met with other males that were
Yeah.
residing in that apartment?
Yes, there was another person residing, I think, in the living room.
Okay. When you observed Mr. Hernandez on the 24th, presumably you were not in a marked vehicle, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. What kind of, do you remember the vehicle you were in?
I believe I was in a Toyota RAV4.
Okay.
That's ironic. Hopefully not Mr. Hernandez's. Got some explaining to do.
were you facing in apartment 106? Correct me if I'm wrong. That's on the second level of that apartment complex has two floors on it.
It is a
correct?
2-floor complex, but that's the first floor.
It is the first floor.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so was your RAV4 pointed directly at 106 or was it facing away, or do you remember how you were positioned?
Yeah, I was facing his apartment.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're the windshield. You were able to
Yeah.
look directly straight ahead and see 106, correct?
The target apartment, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then you testified you observed Mr. Hernandez place a bag in the rear of his vehicle?
Yeah, like in the rear, the back seat area.
Okay. And I believe your report says right rear passenger door. Does that sound right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then you saw him drive away, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
The RAV4 that Mr. Hernandez was in either had something on the top or those magnets slapped on the side that said cab or taxi or something.
Yes, sir. I do recall having, I believe, one of those magnetic stickers. I believe, yes.
Okay.
Okay. In your report, you indicated that the taxi cab company was a Vasquez Taxi. That was the name of the taxi cab company that your databases had indicated what was associated with that tag number, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you'd acknowledge on that Northwood Drive area, it's a heavy concentration of a Hispanic population that resides in that area and has businesses in that area, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. When you saw Mr. Hernandez drive away, were you able to actually see him in the driver's seat were you able to view him drive away?
Yes, sir. I saw him leave the space in front of his building and exit the apartment complex.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you observe any traffic violations that Mr. Hernandez had committed?
No, sir.
Okay. It was later relayed to you, presumably, that another officer observed a failure to maintain lane?
That's correct.
Okay. And do you recall who it was that informed you that they had observed a failure to maintain lane?
That was Canine Handler Cabrera.
Okay. Prior to your calling out on the radio regarding what you had observed, was there a plan in place in terms of who would follow Mr. Hernandez if he left or anything like that? Did you guys develop any sort of plan?
Well, typically there's a plan to follow people, but it's just based off that person's direction of travel, who follows them. It's not like specific, this person has to follow them. It's dependent on where the target goes.
If he turned left out of the apartment complex, it may be someone different who follows than if he turned right, because you don't want to make a sudden U-turn to make it clear you're following someone.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And as to Canine Officer Cabrera, are you aware of where he was positioned at the time that Mr. Hernandez departed the complex?
I don't recall specifically where he was, but he was in that area. I don't know exactly where though.
Okay. And you'd acknowledge that from Mr. Hernandez's apartment to the little strip mall that he was ultimately stopped, that's like 2 or 3/10 of a mile. Very
short distance.
Okay.
Yeah.
You could drive that distance at the posted speed anywhere from 30 to 45 seconds. You'd agree with that?
I don't know the seconds, but it is not a long distance. No, it's not.
Okay. And did you at any time instruct Officer Cabrera directly regarding to follow Mr. Hernandez, or he just happened to be the officer that did that?
No, our intent was to conduct a traffic stop if
Okay.
a probable cause existed.
Okay.
And so Canine Handler Cabrera has a marked vehicle to do that sort of enforcement.
Okay. What other officers were part of this team that you had referred to earlier?
We have a unit. I don't know specifically who was out there, but it was myself, Canine Handler Cabrera, probably Detective Villa Gomez, and it would have been Sergeant Sheffield was our sergeant at the time.
Okay. Are you familiar with the two officers that arrived on scene after Officer Cabrera's stop?
I know he had marked units back him up. I know one of them was a traffic unit officer, I believe Davis.
Okay.
I believe, yes.
All right. And of the individuals that you just mentioned, were any others equipped with a canine?
No.
Okay.
No, sir.
So Officer Cabrera was the only canine officer in that unit, that team that you had with you that day?
Yes.
Okay. And you had testified that the plan was to, if probable cause developed for a traffic stop, to have Mr. Hernandez stop. Is that correct?
Yes, if we felt it was appropriate based off what occurred, then yes.
Okay. And there wasn't any other independent reason for you to have been able to stop Mr. Hernandez at that point, correct?
Well, I believe at that point, I was conducting a drug investigation, suspected methamphetamine trafficker. And based off working these cases, oftentimes they have to transport drugs in bags and other objects.
Mhm.
And when Mr. Hernandez left, I believe that it was probable that there was probably drugs in that bag that he left with.
Okay. Just 1 second. I'll make sure I didn't forget anything. Did you ever review Officer Cabrera's body worn camera or patrol camera video before making any charging decisions?
Before making charging decisions? No,
Right.
sir.
Okay. Have you reviewed it before testifying today?
I may have watched it after the fact, but not anytime recently, no.
Okay. All right. That's all I have, Judge. Thank you.
Mr. Jordan, any redirect for Detective Reynolds?
Just very, very briefly, Your Honor. Detective Reynolds, you said that you used a few different databases once you received the phone number from the informant. As part of your searches, can you recall what normally comes up if you search a telephone number?
It really varies based off the phone number. It could be very specific. It could be very general. Sometimes it has like an address and a name attached to it. It really depends on the phone number and what's in the database.
Is there, in your experience, is there ever a height listed or weight listed?
That would be on GCIC, not on like an Accurate or like an open source database.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. May the detective step down?
No objection.
All right, you're free to go. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Judge.
Do you mind, I assume it's K-9 handler Cabrera who's out. Did you mind sending him in on your way out? Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor. I appreciate you. Thanks so much. Your Honor, the state intended to introduce two exhibits through K-9 handler Cabrera, which are his dash camera and his body worn camera.
Okay.
And I'm on the Zoom. I will need to share my screen to accomplish those at the appropriate.
You should be able to do that.
Raise your right hand. Swear affirm that the testimony you'll give will be true, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
You know your name, have a seat.
Thank you.
Hey, spell your name for the record.
Sure. John Cabrera.
John, first name, last name Cabrera, C-A-B as in boy, R-E-R-A.
How are you doing, Officer Cabrera?
Good, how are you, sir?
Good. How are you employed currently?
I'm with the Sandy Springs Police Department.
Okay, and were you with the Sandy Springs Police Department on January 24th of 2022?
Yes,
Okay, and how long have you been employed with the Sandy Springs Police Department?
since 2019.
Okay, and what are your current duties and responsibilities?
Currently, I'm on uniform patrol, evening watch.
Okay, and do you know a Detective James Reynolds?
I do.
And how do you know him?
I've worked with him, met him when I came over to the agency.
Okay, and how often do you work with him?
It varies. There have been times where it was a pretty consistent basis, and there were times where I've worked with other officers.
Okay, are you ever asked to assist Detective James Reynolds?
Yes.
Okay, and on January 24th, did you hear Detective James Reynolds over the dispatch radio?
Yes, but I believe he called me prior to that,
Okay, he called you.
asking for my location and where I was at in the area for
Okay.
assistance.
All right. And did he elaborate when he said that he needed assistance?
He did. He said he was conducting a narcotics investigation, and he was conducting surveillance in the area of Northwood Drive. And he possibly needed uniform presence as well as a canine. I was a canine handler at the time, for assistance on a traffic stop should he need it.
Okay. And did he in fact need, or did he in fact enlist you to conduct a traffic stop on January 24th of 2022?
Yes, he did.
Okay. And did you in fact conduct that traffic stop?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And do you recall what kind of vehicle it was that you stopped?
I believe it was a smaller SUV.
Okay.
I can't remember the make or model specifically.
Okay. And did you witness that vehicle commit a traffic violation prior to pulling it over?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And once you pulled that vehicle over, what did you do?
This particular one was interesting because the driver immediately got out of the vehicle, which is not common for a traffic stop. So it was a little nerve-wracking for me whenever something like that happens. But I explained to the driver why I pulled him over, began speaking with the driver.
Were you speaking in English or Spanish to the driver?
Both. I can speak Spanish. I'm not an expert by any means, but I did my best to communicate in both English and Spanish to the driver.
Okay. And particularly, what do you recall what traffic violation you witnessed the driver commit?
Yes, it was a failure to maintain lane.
Okay. And you stated before that the driver of the vehicle immediately got out of the vehicle. What happened after you made contact with him?
Yeah, so he immediately exited the vehicle and began approaching me, which again is just not common for traffic stops. So I explained, I believe he asked immediately why I pulled him over. I kind of figured there was going to be a language barrier based on him speaking, so I did my best to communicate the reason for the traffic stop. So I explained the reason for the traffic stop. He kept looking over his shoulder at the vehicle. And he was breathing pretty heavily, and I could tell that he was exhibiting the signs of nervousness and almost fear, which again I found odd because up to that point I was being very cordial and trying my best to explain to him why I pulled him over. So when I realized those signs, I started asking questions about what may or may not be inside the vehicle. So I asked if there were any narcotics, large amounts of U.S. currency, or any weapons in the vehicle, to which he said no. At that point, based on his behavior immediately being pulled over, I asked for consent to search the vehicle. He did not consent to a search of the vehicle. I was still within the investigatory period of that traffic stop. So another backup officer had arrived on scene. I had him stand by, or had her stand by with the driver, and I retrieved my canine for an open air sniff on the vehicle.
Okay. And before you retrieved your canine, did you get the driver's license of the driver?
I did.
Okay. And do you recall the identity of the driver?
I can't remember his first name, but I believe his last name is Mr. Hernandez.
Okay. And now you stated previously that you retrieved your canine from the vehicle. Was that after you had received his license?
I did. I collected his license and his demographic information. And then while he was standing by with the other officers when I retrieved my canine.
Okay. And what's your canine's name?
Canine Falco.
Okay. And you stated earlier that you're no longer a canine handler?
No longer a canine.
Okay. And at that time, how long had you been with Canine Falco?
Canine Falco, that was going to be around 3 years with him.
Okay. And was that canine trained to detect narcotics?
Yes, he was.
Okay. And as part of that training, how did Canine Falco alert when narcotics were found?
Yeah, so there are two differences between an alert and a final indication. So the alert behavior that he exhibited was the heavy breathing. So when he gets in odor or a section of the vehicle, when a dog is in odor, they'll start taking deep breaths. They start getting a little frantic. For Canine Falco specifically, his ears will go back, his tail will start wagging really fast, and then they are trained to conduct what we call a final indication trained behavior, whether that's a sit, a lay down. Some dogs scratch. Canine Falco will sit, stare, and bark. But he's not limited to any one of those behaviors. He's laid down before. He has tried to bite at an area, sometimes packages, when he's in odor. And that would be the part of the final indication. But the alert was the behavior exhibited before.
Okay, and did Canine Falco in fact alert to Mr. Hernandez's vehicle?
Yes, he did.
Okay, and what did you do following the alert?
So I brought Canine Falco. He is an apprehension dog as well. So I secured him back in the vehicle. Then I returned to Mr. Hernandez. I did my best to explain that my canine positively alerted to his vehicle. So based off of that alert, I'd be conducting a search of the vehicle. And I did conduct that search.
Okay, and at that point, do you recall if Mr. Hernandez was being detained at that point?
At that point, yes, he was detained.
Okay. And to be more specific, was he in handcuffs at that point?
I cannot remember if he was in handcuffs at the time of the search. I don't believe so, but I can't recall.
And now, did you yourself search the vehicle?
I myself searched the vehicle.
Okay, and what did you find as a result of that search?
I found a small bag. There was a small like zipper or zippered bag. I opened that bag up, and inside I located methamphetamine or suspected methamphetamine and cocaine.
And what was your involvement after finding what you suspected to be narcotics in the vehicle?
So this was, again, an assistance for our narcotics investigator. So I called him. I let him know what had transpired in the traffic stop. And I let him know that, my canine alerted to the vehicle. The vehicle was searched, and I located those narcotics. So I called him. It was already his investigation. I let him know what was going on. Detective Rennells, along with a couple of other investigators, arrived on scene and took over the investigation.
Okay. And was the dash camera on your vehicle working on January 24th of 2022?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And are you aware of how that dash camera operates?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And how does it operate?
So it operates a couple of different ways. It's an Axon camera system. So it can be activated one of two ways. Or three ways, actually. It's connected through like a program or app on my laptop. So once I pull the Axon app up, I can see all my cameras. I can activate it on my laptop by hitting which camera I want to start recording. Okay. I can physically hit the device so it lays flat. For the front facing camera, and for the rear facing, it's vertical. So I can tap the button, it'll start recording. Or the easiest way is when I activate my lights, all cameras activate.
Okay.
In the vehicle.
If I have you correctly, it is often, it's not automatic unless your lights are on. Is that correct?
Correct. So they are off unless I physically start it. And I can physically start it one of those three ways, either on the computer, a physical touch, or activating my emergency lights, which is the most common.
Okay. And did you have the opportunity before today to review your dash camera for January 24th of 2022?
I did not. I haven't reviewed it.
Okay. If I can share my screen now, I'm going to show you a particular portion of your dash camera, and you can just let me know if that is indeed your dash camera from that day.
Okay.
And I don't know if it matters. I don't have any issue with admitting both the dash camera and the body worn camera, however you want to label it. I've got no objection. I don't need to lay a foundation. I'm confident it's the same one.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a stipulation to the foundation for both the dash cam and the body worn cam. So if you want to tender those now, if you know their exhibit numbers, we can at least admit them and then you'll figure out how you're going to publish them.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the state would like to tender into evidence, given defense's statement that there is no objection. State's Exhibit 1, which is the dash camera, and State's Exhibit 2, which is K9 handler Cabrera's body worn camera.
Okay.
And at this time, I'm going to share my screen and begin playing State's Exhibit 1, which is the dash camera.
Now, before you go, will there be audio here that we're trying to listen to, or it's video only?
I apologize. There is audio as well. I always forget.
Okay, so when you're doing the share, make sure you click those little boxes so that it optimizes for, you would have already been confronted with those. So hopefully you check those boxes.
There's sound. There we go. I believe there might be a delay, Your Honor.
That's been known to happen. But right now you're sharing not the video player, you're sharing the Windows Explorer, File Explorer.
My
So
apologies, Your Honor.
it's okay.
And I'm going to pause the video, Your Honor. I don't believe that there's any sound initially in the video. And I have paused the video at 10 seconds and resuming play.
Can you pause it, please?
Yes, Your Honor.
So Officer Cabrera, are you on Northwood Drive now, or you're approaching Northwood Drive, or you're not even in Sandy Springs here?
Yes, we are in Sandy Springs. This is Northwood Drive.
Okay. And are you approaching the apartment complex out of which Mr. Hernandez's taxi came, or you're
No,
going
I
to
was
turn around
first,
in a minute?
No, I was further down the road. So the complex or wherever it was that they were running surveillance, he pulls out. They advised me via the radio that the subject that they've been conducting surveillance on has pulled out, and I come out from my area on maybe the last street. Northwood is not long at all. If it's a mile,
Okay.
it would be a lot. So I was parked, I believe on I can't remember the name of the street, but the street closest to Lake Forest.
Okay. So you haven't gotten to your parking spot yet. You're driving basically.
No, I've gotten there. There is there's a delay, or not a delay, but when you activate the camera, it goes back either 15 or 30 seconds.
Okay. Got it.
My lights are not, I'd have to look on the actual Axon. I don't know if it'll show it here, but on the Axon app, it'll show you when the lights are activated.
Okay.
Prior to that.
Thanks. I just wanted to get oriented here. All right.
And then I can't, there's like a.
Oh, yeah. So what does the first one say?
It just says host has spotlighted your video for everyone. Would you like to unmute?
Don't unmute. So stay muted.
So stay muted.
Yep. And then got it. Hit the got it.
Okay,
Much better.
perfect. Thank you,
Okay.
sir.
Yep.
Kilo 15 traffic stop. Kilo 15, 1-5. Northwood at Roswell. It's going to be Tango X-ray 13571 on a white RAV4.
Mr. Jordan, can you pause it?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so now that I understand where we are and the pullover has already happened, can you start it from the very beginning again?
Yes, Your Honor.
Kilo 15 traffic stop. Kilo 15, 1-5.
Can you pause it again?
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks. Officer Cabrera, why would the audio have suddenly come on? Does it come on because that's a sign that your emergency lights have come on? Because all of a sudden we hear Falco.
Right. So like I said, there's that delay. So the delay of, and I can't remember if it's 15 or 30 seconds, that period, there's no audio. But that tone that you hear is the actual cameras kicking on from the moment I hit my light. So when you hear that beep, beep,
Yep.
and then my dog whining, that is
That's when the lights went on.
That's when I kicked my lights and the camera's activated.
Thank you.
But you're also getting that 15 or 30 seconds prior.
Yep.
You would like me to resume play, Your Honor?
Well, you're back in control again.
It's going to be Tango X-ray 13571 on a white RAV4.
If I may pause, Your Honor, in 15 seconds.
Sure.
At this point, Officer Cabrera, were you explaining to Mr. Hernandez that you witnessed a traffic violation?
Yes.
Is Falco going nuts like that all the time you're driving around, or it's because you've stopped and he's thinking, I'm going to get out soon?
Probably a little bit of both. He, like I said, he is an apprehension dog. So a lot of times in training, we do vehicle bailouts, and that's the pop button and all that. So he does understand that when I exit the vehicle and the lights are on, because he knows when the lights are on, because it tones, he understands that it's a possibility that he's going to work.
Okay.
So all day, sometimes if he's in that mood,
Okay.
but typically when I hit those lights, he's getting ready to work and he gets pretty excited, especially because he can see me this whole time.
Yep. Okay.
I may pause right here, Your Honor, at 1:59. Officer Cabrera, did you, at that point, when you pointed to the front of the vehicle, what were you asking Mr. Hernandez to do?
It was I was asking him to stand there.
Okay.
And you now have in your hands his driver's license.
Correct.
And do you recall why you were asking him to stand in front of the vehicle?
Yeah, again, I don't think my backup unit had arrived yet. And I was still, even though I could see that he didn't have any weapons or anything in his hand, I still thought that it was pretty odd how quickly he exited the vehicle and approached me, which is not common on a traffic stop. So I wanted him to stand in a position where I can both access my computer and keep a visual on him.
And I'm resuming play.
black male immediately come out. He's watching me.
Hey guys, Daisy's en route to back him up. If you got a patrol car, they can back him up so you don't blow your vehicle over here. Yeah, no, Daisy, I'm on the phone with Daisy. He's on his route. He's en route to back him up. 274 million. Traffic unit just pulled in. So. Hey, is there anyone else you listen to? No, so you'll see.
Hey guys, I'm out with Jose Hernandez Perez.
Check on the north 3K. You got me a phone call request. 4-3 and 6.
I may briefly pause the video, Your Honor, to
Okay.
ask counsel a question.
So I'm going to ask a question while they're conferring. So those officers took Mr. Hernandez they cuffed him. Falco's already been outside and already alerted, and you told them there was an alert. So now there's probable cause to detain him. If not, why are they suddenly cuffing him?
So probably both, based on watching that video, I'll be honest with you. I'm putting Falco back into the truck. So I can't really see what's going on up front. What it appears to me is the alert or the final sit indication is overly obvious. And I've worked with these officers before, so they're kind of familiar.
They know
with
what's
K9
coming.
Falco, yeah. So when K9 Falco sat and barked, I can't remember if I gave them a nod or whatever, but it looks like based on the video, this had kind of nothing to do with me. I believe the dog alerts, and then he starts reaching for his pants or his pocket or whatever. And it seems like that is something between him and that officer, whether the officer, because I know you can't hear the audio from the in-car.
Right.
It would have to be their body cam. But from what it looks to me, he either said, please don't put your hands in your pocket or whatever. And he goes again. And that's when they detain him. But I actually, at this point, I'm still getting his leashes off and putting him up in the truck. So I didn't see this part of it, but I didn't tell them. Just watching the video, it seems like it was between him and this officer.
Okay, and we don't even need to get into the speculation piece. What we've been hearing and what we saw a little bit of, Falco's already done his thing, and you are right now getting Falco back in your car. And so these officers would have been in a position to see Falco sit and bark, and they know what that means. And so on their own volition, they may have said, it's now time to put you in handcuffs. It may have been what you said, oh, he's reaching for his pocket. I don't need to go there.
Sure.
It's just Falco's done. And they've worked with you and they know what that meant.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
I would just say, I'll go to it when I'm crossing him. So it's all in evidence right now, right? Yeah. So if you don't want to put anything else, then you don't have to, and I'll just use whatever I got for cross if that's good.
I agree. I don't know why you play more, but you're welcome to. Maybe there's a highlight in there.
Your Honor, and at this point, we would remove State's Exhibit 1, and we would like to briefly publish State's Exhibit 2, which is already defense counsel has not objected to.
Well, it's admitted. So 1 and 2 are both admitted. 1 dash cam, 2 body cam.
Yes, Your Honor.
So you're free to publish.
Okay, perfecto. Yeah, everything's good? You good? Oh, okay. Okay. ¿Usted vive a las...
Yeah.
A las 66? 66?
Yeah.
Ok. Perfecto. ¿Y el taxi es suyo?
Yeah, it's mine.
¿El negocio es
Yeah.
de usted?
Yeah.
Ok, perfecto. ¿Usted puede quedar aquí, por favor? I had a black male immediately come out. He's watching me.
Can you pause for a sec?
Yes.
So this came up before today, Officer Cabrera. It's something the defense has flagged. What's the black male you're talking? Is that your way you're referring to Mr. Hernandez, or there's someone else that we're not seeing?
No, you could see it on the video. He's got the mask right behind Mr. Hernandez. And
Okay.
that first person I'm speaking to, I'm actually directing it towards him because he's trying to interject on my traffic stop. So he's pacing back and forth and going, hey, is everything okay? And trying to interject. And I go, yeah, everything's fine. And he can go. So I'm advising them because he's still there. He's just on the other side of Mr. Hernandez's vehicle.
Okay, so your reference to black male is that other person, not Mr. Hernandez.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So if you play it back, you'll see him and he's almost starts walking like towards me.
Okay.
On this stop, which obviously was a red flag.
Sure.
For me.
Okay.
So that's why I was advising them, hey, almost unrelated to this stop, because again, they were doing surveillance on Mr. Hernandez. And
Right.
there's an additional black male that's trying to.
Okay, and that may have been intel for them. Oh, we know that's the customer, or whatever it may be. You're sharing that.
Well, I honestly, it was more for myself
Hmm.
because at this point I'm by myself.
Okay.
And I know that they're in the area, but there was absolutely no reason that person, he came out of the blue. I didn't even see where he came out from. But,
Okay.
he immediately attempted to interject himself on the stop. And that's actually who I'm talking to before when I'm speaking English. I'm
Yeah.
talking to that male.
Not to Mr. Hernandez.
Mr. Hernandez.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Jordan.
Yes, sir.
Hey guys, Beijing and out to back them up. If you got a patrol car, they can back you up so you don't blow your vehicle. vehicle over here. Yeah, no, Beiju. I'm on the phone with Beiju. He's on his route. He's en route to back him up. Criminal 74, right? Traffic in, just pulled in. No, showing the thing.
Hey guys, I'm out with Jose Hernandez Perez.
Check on the north 3. Can you copy a phone call, please? North 3 after.
Ok, señor, algo que yo pregunto por todos que yo paro, es si usted tiene armas en el carro, ok, drogas, ok, dinero, algo más de dinero, ok. ¿Puedo hacer un busco para chequear?
No, pero ¿por qué me está parando entonces?
Ok, porque usted no tenía su cinturón y...
Yo lo traigo, ¿no? Yo me lo acabo de quitar, oficial.
Ok, en el calle usted no tenía el
Sí, yo
cinturón.
lo traigo, en serio, se lo prometo.
No, yo estaba detrás de usted y usted no sacaste cuando usted parqueó.
¿Cómo no me parqué?
No, usted parquea, pero usted no tenía su cinturón.
If I may pause the video at 3:18. For those of us that don't speak Spanish, Officer Cabrera, what were you talking to Mr. Hernandez about at this point?
Yeah, so he had asked me why I had stopped him, and while reviewing this video, that's another thing that I remember as part of this stop was when I got behind him and we immediately turned in. You could see I got right up on his bumper. He parks, he never takes his seatbelt off. So I knew that he didn't at any time when I got directly behind him prior to pulling into the private parking lot, because I was able to see inside of the vehicle, he didn't have his seatbelt on as well. So here I'm explaining to him that while he was driving and I got behind him, I observed that he didn't have the seatbelt. And additionally, when I got behind him and he immediately exited the vehicle, at no point did he ever release his seatbelt.
Right, and I will resume playing the video at 3 minutes and 18 seconds.
Okay. Hey, can you just watch him real quick? Hey, where's your...
I'm going to pause the video at 4 minutes and 34 seconds. Now, you said earlier that K9 Falco had a few different alerts. Can you walk us through what his alert was in the video that you just saw?
Sure, you actually see it twice when he's on the driver's side of the vehicle, the immediate change of behavior, he goes to sit down. So when he's going to sit down and his body starts shaking and his tail's going crazy like that, that was actually handler error on my part. Is I'm tugging on his neck while we're going. So he's giving the alert behavior, which I observed and I knew, but he never gave me the sit indication. We hadn't really ran the entirety of the car because you see how excitable he is. So I allowed him to continue searching the vehicle or sniffing the vehicle. And then when he gets to the other side, you could see the complete change in behavior. He stops at the door, jumps up, lunges at the door. The reason for that, would you like me to go into kind of the reason for that behavior and how they're put on odor and what the dog thinks is happening?
I mean,
Like based
you
on
don't-
that behavior?
that's a Mr. Jordan or Mr. DeTardo call.
Yes, if
I've been through these before.
Yes, if you could please walk us through that.
Sure. So the dogs, when they're trained either overseas or at an outside vendor, the way they put them on odor is dogs are very, 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 very unique with their sense of smell. They could smell 5 odors in one breath, essentially. So, for instance, the example I use is a pizza or a mom's favorite sauce. You walk in and you smell the sauce. When a dog smells in, they smell odors individually. So they smell the garlic separate from the tomato, separate from the pepper. They smell each odor individually. So the way they train dogs on either explosives or narcotics on these odors is they get a toy. It's usually a plastic PVC pipe when they're younger in age. And they get them excited to play with that toy. That toy is the only toy that they play with. Then as they mature, they will start putting cotton balls with the odor of whatever they're trying to imprint on the dog. In this case, it would be narcotics. So they will put the odor, and it's usually cotton balls of heroin, methamphetamine, marijuana, whatever it is you're imprinting on the dog. Then they do hideaway throws. So they'll go to an area with high grass and start throwing that toy into the high grass out of sight from the dog and allowing the dog to go find it. Eventually the dog, those odors imprint on that dog. So when the dog smells those odors, he relates it to my toy is inside of here. So that's where all that excitement comes from. He's smelling the odor of narcotics. I don't know which specific one he's smelling, because obviously I can't talk to him, but based on his behavior, I know it's one of those 5 odors that has been imprinted. So that's where all the excitement and the jumping and lunging is. He's trying to get to his toy, but that calm sit and stare that he exhibits in the video kind of twice. The first time, like I said, before he could fully go, that was my error from pulling on the leash, which pulled him away. But the second time when he does that, that is his trained final sit indication, which is a trained response to finding that odor.
Okay. And I will resume playing the video at 4 minutes and 34 seconds. Hold on.
You could search him. It's a positive alert. Hey, Beju, can you open the car when you get his keys? All right, he's in custody now. Okay. He's under arrest. Hey, can you guys hear me?
At this point, Your Honor, this state would be finished with playing the video, and definitely defense can play any portions that they like, as it's been admitted as an exhibit.
Agreed.
Just a few follow-up questions, Officer Cabrera. Now, we just had the opportunity to watch your dash camera. Do you recall when you saw Mr. Hernandez commit the traffic violation?
Yeah, it was right before I activated my lights, and you could see it on the video through the rear of that front of the vehicle that's in front. So they're in their lane of travel, and you could see Mr. Hernandez's vehicle go left and offset from that vehicle. Now, what I'm able to do and what the camera is not able to do is I can look around that vehicle like this, whereas the camera stays pointing straight. But through that rear of that front vehicle, you can see him go over the line. You just can't physically see the tires going over the line. But like I said, I'm able to maneuver myself when I'm driving in a way where I can see around that vehicle to the left side, whereas the camera cannot.
The camera is mounted somewhere aligned with the rear view mirror, so it's in the center of the dash.
It's pretty much center. It's pretty much center of the dash. Of course, there are a couple of things that would negate that, like in the Tahoe. Now that I'm thinking about it, I can't remember if it's lower because of the heat, the newer vehicles with that, I can't remember what the name of it is, the pad sensor, whatever it is. So it may be a little offset. It may be a little bit more to the left, a little bit more to the right. But generally speaking, it's right there center with the rear view mirror.
Yeah.
And no further questions at this time, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. DiTardo.
Yes. All right. Officer Cabrera, you had testified earlier that at some point in time, you're contacted by Detective Reynolds for assistance, correct?
Yes.
And had you had any involvement with Detective Reynolds' investigation prior to January 24th, 2022?
For this case specifically, or have I worked with him before?
No, just this specific case.
No, sir.
Okay. And when you're called by Detective Reynolds that day, what is his instructions to you as to where he wants you to be and what he wants you to do?
Sure. So he said he was conducting surveillance on Northwood Drive. He said that he had eyes on a target that he was working. So he asked if I was in the area, and two, if I could respond to the area should he need a vehicle stopped in reference to his investigation. So that was the reason that I was in that area specifically, waiting for him while they conducted their surveillance.
Okay. And you indicated you were parked out on the name of the road. I just had it written down on it.
Somewhere near Lake Forest.
Lake Forest Drive, Northwest.
Yeah, there's a road that's still off of Northwood before you get to Lake Forest. I believe it's the first left. I can't remember the name of the road. I believe that's where I was sitting that day, but somewhere in that area.
Okay. And were you parked or?
I was parked.
You were parked. Okay. And from where you were parked, could you see Detective Reynolds?
No.
Okay. And at some point, presumably, and correct me if I'm wrong, Detective Reynolds comes over and says he's left the building or left the apartment complex, or what does he say to you?
Correct. So he's conducting surveillance on that day. He says over the radio, a male just approached the vehicle. There was an exchange of a bag. And from where he was positioned, he said that bag was placed under the rear back seat.
Okay. So he indicated that there was an exchange that he witnessed and that
Correct.
the bag was placed in the rear passenger seat?
Rear seat.
Rear seat.
Yeah. Rear area of the vehicle under the seat from wherever it was that he was positioned.
Okay. And then anything else?
And that after that exchange, now the subject that they were conducting surveillance on was leaving.
Okay. Did he describe the vehicle?
He did.
And how did he describe it?
He said it's a white SUV. I don't recall if he said it was the make or model of it specifically, but he said it's a smaller white SUV, said the location of where he was leaving, the direction he was heading, and then also specifically that it was a taxi vehicle.
Okay.
A taxi SUV. So it had the markings of taxi on it.
Okay. So we've seen State's Exhibit 1, the camera that's mounted on your patrol car. It cuts on Northwood Drive when you're following the defendant's vehicle, correct?
Correct.
Okay. There's a vehicle in between your patrol car and the defendant's vehicle, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, how long had you been on that road following my client before State's Exhibit 1 starts? Was it 5 seconds, 10 seconds?
Not long at all. I'd have to say maybe around 15, 20 seconds, because Northwood is not that long. Like I said, I think it's maybe, if it's a mile long, that's probably a lot.
Okay.
He calls out the vehicle description. I pull out. I'm right there rather quickly. I'm able to catch up to the vehicle.
Okay. So the defendant's vehicle had already gotten onto Northwood by the time you're following him. In other words, you didn't see him depart from the apartment complex, did you?
No, he was wherever it was that they were running surveillance. I can't remember the address right now.
Okay.
That would be a question for James, but he had exited that location already. And they were still conducting surveillance, so they had eyes on the vehicle. So it was, it could have been the vehicle's turning out now, or hey, he's on Northwood headed towards Roswell. And they had indicated, based on what they observed and based off of their investigation prior, that they wanted the vehicle stopped under suspicion of narcotics.
Okay. And so did you write a report in this case?
I did.
You did write a report?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a copy of that report?
That's news to Mr. DiTardo.
I personally did not bring a copy. I know James had a copy of it when he was here. I personally did not have I didn't bring one today. I thought it was going to be here. I'm sorry.
No, you're not. You haven't done anything wrong. You're telling us what you remember about this. Why would you have written a report? Because you did a traffic stop, et cetera, and so you need to do that, or because Rennell's asked you to, or?
Well, there's two reasons. So every time I use the dog, it is a deployment. So I have to report on what the dog did, how he did, and whether or not it was a confirmed positive alert or what have you, as well as any other issues. I mean, I open the door and the dog bites me. That needs to be reported. I open the door and give him the command to start searching. He doesn't start searching. Well, so basically every time I use that dog, it needs to be reported. But since this traffic stop went the way it did, not only do I put the canine portion of it, I also put the police enforcement of it, of what I observed, what happened, who I made contact with, and eventually what happened, which was the positive canine alert. And I'm paraphrasing here in the report, but basically canine alerts on the vehicle. I conduct a search. I notify the investigating officers what I located, and the investigations turned over to them, and then that's where their reports and everything else would pick up. But yes, there is a written report from me that I did.
So, Mr. DiTardo, Mr. Jordan's going to get that. You're going to have a chance to look at it. We're going to leave the evidence open. I'm going to ask you to finish everything else you would cover with Officer Cabrera. And then after you get the report, if you think there's a reason why we need to get either Rennell's or Cabrera back in here, we'll do that. So I know you don't have it. And so there may be things you'd want to ask this witness about in particular as the author of the report. Let's get you that report and then see what we need to do to pick up. But rather than stopping here, which would be a fair request, saying, I don't really want to ask any more questions. I know you have a bunch of questions that you were going to ask anyway. Let's get through those, because then we may be able to address some of the issues while we're working through the missing report.
That works, Judge.
Okay.
So moving on to and correct me if I'm wrong, but it appeared to me you had not reviewed the body camera or the patrol camera prior to coming here today. Is that correct?
No, I have not.
Okay. So you had described earlier the various methods in which these cameras will turn on. Do you recall with specificity what it was that began the patrol car video?
I believe it's the activation of the lights. So it goes back the 30, whatever it is, that silent portion of the video, that's why there's no audio.
Gotcha.
So it basically, and again, I don't know, and I want to say some vehicles can be different, because I think you can set the parameters to that, like whether you want it 60 seconds prior, 40 seconds, but that video, the reason there's no audio is because it is that set, that setting for that camera.
Okay.
So the reason that it was activated, the reason we have that and there's no audio, I would say it's safe to say I don't ever really hit the computer or physically hit it. So, and since there's no audio, it would be the lights activating, and that's the 30-second, 40-second capture prior.
Okay. So I want to go back to State's Exhibit 1, the patrol car video. Hopefully I do this right. Okay. Yeah. All right. So your testimony earlier on direct was, the question was, where did the failure to maintain lane infraction occur? And if I heard you correctly, it sounded like you said it occurred right before my client made that right-hand turn into the shopping center. Was that what your testimony was?
I believe so.
Okay.
In the, as he's approaching there, I can't remember specifically. I'd have to watch the video again, but
okay.
Yeah.
And you'd acknowledge that while that infraction may not be visible through State's Exhibit 1, your testimony was your body and your eyes were positioned in a way that you were able to see that, even if the video itself didn't capture that, correct?
Correct. I still believe the video captures it, because like I said, if you look through that front car, you can see his vehicle go over. You just cannot physically see the tires, and I agree with that. But when that happened, yes, I'm able to look left around that front vehicle, whereas the camera obviously cannot.
Okay. And so ultimately, that's the reason why you initiate the traffic stop of my client's vehicle, because you testify you observed and failed to maintain his lane, correct?
I wouldn't say 100% that's the reason. I had received information from the investigating officers that they were conducting surveillance, that they were conducting a narcotics investigation with this person specifically, that they had been doing surveillance. They had done their due diligence on whatever it was that they were doing in terms of this investigation. So the fact that they saw this male, they were conducting surveillance on him, saw an exchange of the bag. This particular area is a high crime area. We've got multiple shootings, multiple drug arrests. We've made multiple felony drug arrests almost on a nightly basis. This is a known area for drug sales as well as drug use. So I had in my mind, when I was given all this information, I did have the suspicion based off of what they had told me that he was involved in narcotics, either transaction, sale, what have you, based off of their surveillance and what they said. So I did have the reasonable suspicion prior to that probable cause, but I did observe that traffic infraction, and ultimately that's when I activated my emergency lights.
Okay, and to be clear, you were not involved in any way, shape, or form with the prior surveillance of Mr. Hernandez, correct?
No, the only involvement I would have was the information on that day that they had given me. So they, hey, we're doing surveillance out here. We've got a target. I don't know the specifics. I don't know. I wasn't involved in how they got it, how long they had been there, but I was given the information of what they had just observed. And they did tell me that this was an ongoing narcotics investigation that they had.
Okay. And to be clear, they had informed you that they witnessed an exchange of a bag between two parties, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That a gentleman brought a bag to the vehicle, and while the driver was still inside the vehicle, that man placed the bag inside the vehicle, walked away, and then the driver left.
Okay. So is it fair to say that the drugs were the focus of your investigation? If a legal basis for you arose for you to search the defendant's vehicle, you were going to do that. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. And so your testimony earlier was that you, in your opinion, believed my client to be nervous, unusually nervous.
Yes.
And you also found it unusual that he got out of his vehicle when you stopped him, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Would you acknowledge that this is a different situation than perhaps you conducting a traffic stop on a roadway, because he had already turned into the shopping center and had parked in the shopping center where there were businesses that were open? That's a little bit of a different situation in terms of whether you'd expect somebody to get out of their vehicle.
No, not at all. I've conducted hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of traffic stops, and I actually prefer to initiate my traffic stops in a shopping center somewhere that is off the roadway. And I've conducted, again, hundreds of traffic stops where people have pulled in to a parking space. I purposefully lit them up or activated my emergency lights on purpose near the entrance to a parking lot. And no one other than someone bailing and physically running on foot has gotten out of their car and walked towards me once my emergency lights were activated. So I would say no, that has not been my experience.
Okay. Would you acknowledge that, would you agree that there is nothing illegal about driving into a shopping center, parking your vehicle in a parking space, and getting out of your vehicle if you were going about your day? Nothing unusual about that, correct?
If you're going about your day, no, not at
Okay.
all.
But because that's, and that's exactly what you observed, to the point that you had, let me strike that and ask it this way. When you initiated, when you, I think you used the terms lit him up, when you blue lighted my client, he had already began his turn into the shopping center, correct?
I'd have to review the video again.
All right, well, let's review. And again, I believe your prior testimony was that your audio began on State's Exhibit 1 when the blue lights were activated, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You need to make sure you've muted your computer.
Mute my computer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because if you're sharing screen and you check the little boxes about share, optimize video and audio sharing, your machine should be muted and the court sound system should pick it up.
Okay.
In worst case scenario, we'll get Mr. Jordan to play it again, since you should have the same copy.
That setting that you were just referring to, Judge, where can I find that?
So you need to get out of sharing. So stop sharing. And then when you click to share screen, there are these little boxes in the corners down in the bottom.
Optimize video clip?
Yep.
Okay. And then also share sound?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's try that again. And I'm taking up at 19 seconds on State's 1.
So the infraction happened prior to my lights being activated.
That wasn't my question. My question was, you'd acknowledge that State's 1 shows that your blue light was turned on after my client had already began the right-hand turn into the shopping center.
Correct. Or
Okay.
right at the same time. It's bang, bang. I don't.
Okay, well, let's play one more time.
Okay.
Going back to 21 seconds. We don't hear any sound right now, do we?
No.
27 seconds, correct?
Correct.
Began turning right, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. "31 seconds, we just heard a double beep. That's when your blue lights would come on, correct?
Correct.
So I'll ask again, do you acknowledge that the right-hand turn occurred before you blue lighted my client's vehicle?
Yes.
Okay.
Would it be a traffic violation if Mr. Hernandez made that right-hand turn without signaling? Or is that, I took my driving test a long time ago, but I'm not saying he did or didn't. I didn't see him signal, but not signaling would be a violation.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. But that's not your focus was, I know you mentioned the seatbelt thing, but your focus, and I think the basis for the citation ultimately was the failure to maintain lane, which was the drifting or veering to the left, where the left side, the driver's side of the RAV4 touched or went across the double yellow line.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Now, in State's Exhibit 1, we hear you call out Kilo 12, and then you call out the tag number of the defendant's vehicle. Is that correct?
No, Kilo 15.
Kilo 15. Okay. And what's Kilo 15 signify?
It's my call sign. So Kilo is the K9 unit. So all of them have the K.
Okay.
So when you call out, it's Kilo and then your number.
Okay.
It was Kilo 15 at the time.
There are 15 K9 units in Sandy Springs Police?
No. So we share our operating system with Dunwoody and Johns Creek and all that. So they have like Kilo 1, 2, 3.
Got it.
And then when Sandy Springs incepted their K9 unit, it started as the supervisor was Kilo 11, and then the numbers went up from there.
Okay.
All right. And then you also call out the tag number of the defendant's vehicle, correct?
Yeah, location and tag number. Yes, sir.
And who were you calling that out to?
Dispatch.
Dispatch. Okay. And so presumably the purpose, one, is so that they know where you are.
Correct.
And also, are they going to run the tag number, or are you just putting that in for the record?
I'm putting that in for both. Hopefully, if they do their job, they run the tag.
Okay.
But sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
Okay. Do you recall in this case whether they did?
No, I would have no way of knowing other than them coming over the radio and saying, typically they won't come over the radio unless there's something wrong with the vehicle. Like for instance,
I'm just asking in this specific situation. Do you
in this specific situation, no, they didn't call out over the radio or anything.
Okay.
So I don't know if they ran it or not.
Okay. Was your team that you were working with that day, were they also able to hear the Kilo 15 and the tag number?
Presumably, yes. You'd have to be on the right channel.
Okay.
And right frequency, but presumably, yes. I mean, they had the ability to. Whether they actually heard it or not, I do not know.
Okay. So going back to the topic of the defendant getting out of his vehicle and you finding that unusual, do you recall that in fact the defendant didn't come over to your vehicle? In fact, you came over to the rear of his vehicle where he was standing.
Right. So the way my vehicle was angled, I have to walk to that side and approach him. And I did it pretty quickly. But when he exited, he was already walking towards me. And I could see that from my angle.
Okay. And going back to States 1, I'm going to publish that portion. I have some follow-up questions.
Kilo 15 traffic stop. Kilo 15, 1-5. Northwood at Roswell. It's going to be Tango X-ray 13571 on a white RAV4.
Great.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but what we just observed is the defendant exits his vehicle, walks to about where his bumper is, waves at you, and then waits for you to approach him on foot, correct?
Yeah, I can't recall if I tell him to stop or I give him the motion, but he's walking over to me. Again, the way my vehicle's angled when I get out, I couldn't see the like his left side because he's close up on his car. So I'm kind of moving out to see where his other hand is, see what's going on, but he is approaching me the whole time.
Okay.
And it's not until I kind of meet him at that front bumper when he stops, because he initially stops and then proceeds to, because again, I'm going slow to make sure I'm not, going to get killed or anything. I can't see that side of his body. So then he proceeds to walk forward again. I see that he doesn't have anything in his hands, and that's when I approach and we stop right at the rear of his vehicle.
Okay. So you'd agree that until you're able to be in front of Mr. Hernandez, as we see here in States 1. You weren't able to see exactly what he was doing with his hands, and so there was some concern for possibly a weapon.
Correct.
Okay. Yet earlier you testified that you were certain that he didn't have his seatbelt on because you never were able to observe him take it off. Isn't that correct?
Correct. So I could see in from the rear of his window. So when I get right up on the bumper, like when he pulls in, I could see that the seatbelt was off. It never moved. And I kept eyes on him the entire time. Again, because of the prior knowledge I had with this being a narcotics investigation. A lot of people who deal in that are armed. They are dangerous. They are unpredictable. So the whole time that I'm there, I'm keeping eyes on that driver inside that window.
Okay. And so your testimony is that you were certain he was not wearing his seatbelt because you didn't see the belt move in a manner consistent with it being taken off.
Correct. It never moved. And he immediately exited the vehicle after he put it in park.
And you had a clear view of that based on the 30 seconds that we just saw in States 1. That's your testimony?
I did. Yes.
Okay. Did you reference the failure to wear his seatbelt at all in your written report?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Did you ever inform Detective Reynolds that you observed my client fail to wear his seatbelt?
I can't remember if I did or not, but I did put it in the report.
Okay. So, and you may not know this because you hadn't reviewed prior to court, but it appears that there's about 10 to 15 seconds of your discussion with my client during this kind of first meeting that's not captured by your body worn camera. You acknowledge that that's what we have here between States 1 and States 2?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And what's the reason for that? Did you just fail to activate your body camera sooner?
Yes. So I can show you because I actually have it on now. There is a setting. So the battery life does not last long on the body cameras.
Mm-hmm.
So you can put them in what's called a sleep mode
Mm-hmm.
or a battery saver mode, which is typically what my body camera is always kept on.
Okay.
When you activate the lights, because it's on sleep mode and it's not constantly sending that signal, which is what drains the battery, it will not activate the body cam. So how I operate is I hit my lights, dash cam, rear camera, whatever cameras are stay running on that are hardwired, they will go on, and I will double tap my body cam to start recording. That brief period where there is no where there's that delay that you mentioned, I don't remember specifically, but I do know that this has happened to me before, especially like someone bailing out of a car, or in this case, someone getting out of the car, as I was so focused on him and making sure he didn't have a weapon on him and trying to figure out exactly what was going on because it wasn't the norm, that I didn't double tap the body cam. But I believe that period, as soon as I approach him, I see that he's got no weapons on him, or at least no weapons on his hand, I immediately activated my body camera.
Okay. And did you ever mention to him during this first interaction that we don't have a recording of, that you observed him fail to maintain his lane? Or were you referring to a seatbelt? Because it appears that you made a gesture.
Yeah, I don't believe so. I believe I mentioned the seatbelt specifically because I really didn't know how to say failure to maintain in Spanish. So I gave him a reason of what I knew, which, seatbelt, cinturón. I knew that was something that we could have common ground, which, additionally, I had the failure to maintain lane when he goes over to that side, which I observed. I just didn't quite know how to say that in Spanish.
All right.
So I stuck with what I knew.
And so that would potentially explain why during the second interaction where he begins arguing with you about why he's being stopped, you didn't mention failure to maintain lane. You were just talking about the seatbelt again.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. All right. So pivoting to States Exhibit 2, the Well, and before I go there, you'd acknowledge that where your vehicle is parked right now, my client wouldn't have been able to reverse out of that spot without hitting your vehicle, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Moving to State's Exhibit 2, which is the body worn camera. I just want to be clear on exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, everything.
Okay. In Spanish and so initially, as you were testifying to earlier, there's the black male on scene. You tell him, yeah, everything's good, you good? And again, you're referring to this guy that you didn't know what his involvement was on scene, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Had you received any information from Detective Reynolds or anybody else that there was a black male that was involved in this investigation?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No. Yeah, I'm strictly engaging with him because he's starting to approach behind Mr. Hernandez.
Okay.
And I had no idea what he was doing. I don't even know if we saw him again.
Okay.
He appeared out of nowhere. I don't know if he was sleeping on the sidewalk or what.
And there's no evidence that he in any way, shape, or form knew my client or had any association with him, correct?
I mean, just based off of my interaction, there's no way of me knowing. I had no idea. I just know that he started talking to me and starting to approach on the traffic stop.
Okay. And so your question to my client in Spanish was, you live in the address on the license? And he goes, yes, the 66. You recall asking him that?
Yeah, I believe I'm trying to ask him and try and find the words of, hey, do you still live at this address? And I believe he stops me and says, yeah, I live right around the corner.
Okay, but in Spanish.
But in Spanish, yes.
Right. And then you ask him in Spanish, okay, perfect. Is the taxi yours and the business is yours too? And
Correct.
He says, yes. Correct.
Sir.
And all in Spanish.
Yes, sir.
And you said you're not an expert in speaking Spanish. What's your basis of your knowledge in terms of your Spanish fluency?
My parents and my family are Puerto Rican, so I grew up speaking Spanish, but I was born and raised in New York. So I can communicate in Spanish. I guess better than the average person where Spanish isn't their primary language. But I obviously I've been living in New York and Georgia my whole life, and once I moved out of my parents' house, stopped really speaking Spanish on a consistent basis. So certain words, will either not come to me or I'm, it takes me a minute to try and all right, let me say it in English and then let me try and.
But to answer the question, it's your family background is.
Correct. It's my family background.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
You didn't talk about failing to maintain lanes at home a lot.
No, that wasn't common language at all.
The word failure never came up in your discussions.
Yeah, it did. It was just in English.
All right, so I'm going to play this out, and I want to just be clear at what point you go back into your vehicle and what you're doing. That's kind of what I'm interested in next. Okay.
Okay.
Perfecto.
That's that male, by the way, in the video.
Yeah, everything's good. You good? Oh, okay. Okay. ¿Usted vive a las... A las 66? Norwood 66? Yeah. Okay. Perfecto. ¿Y el taxi es suyo? Ya, es más. ¿El negocio es de usted? Ya. Okay, perfecto. ¿Usted puede quedar aquí, por favor?
That's asking him if he can stay right here, please. For about 37 seconds, you get back into your vehicle. At this point, you're holding my client's driver's license, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it appears that the things that you do while you're in your vehicle here, you run his plate, you find Jose Hernandez is the registered owner of that vehicle. You relay that to your team at 154. Hey guys, I'm out with Jose Hernandez Perez. And then you close your laptop screen and you step back out of the patrol car. Does that sound correct? Okay.
You need to say yes or no for the record.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else that you did in that period of time that I missed?
Yes. So I believe I'm running the tag. I'm running his ID, and then I'm also running the NCIC, GCIC for warrants, wants, or whatever, because oftentimes a license plate or an ID will not be associated with probation information or warrant information. So typically I will run it through that tertiary tab as well. So I'll run the tag, get the information and say, this vehicle is either registered to the person I'm speaking to or not. If not, I will run the ID. And then additionally, I will run the information through the NCIC wants section, because that information won't come up with just running the OLN.
So in this specific situation, I'm not asking about your general practice. I'm interested in what happens here.
Right.
It appears that you type in the tags, following your fingers, it appears that you're typing in the tag, waiting for the return, calling out that you're seeing that Jose Hernandez Perez is the registered owner of that vehicle, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounded like you just told me if you're in fact out with the person whose vehicle, if you're out with the person whose name returns that vehicle, then you don't move forward to those next two steps, or you do?
No, I do.
Okay. And how do you mechanically perform those runs?
On the laptop.
And how specifically? Like what steps do you take?
It's one of two things. There's different tabs on the side of my laptop. So one is for drivers. The drivers, you could either put in the OLN or you could put the name and date of birth and physically type it out. Same thing for the vehicle. You have a vehicle tab where you can put the tag, run the VIN, check for wants on the vehicle, whatever. So either one of those tabs is what I use.
Okay.
I can't remember specifically on this one if I just typed in his OLN or I typed in his info.
Okay. And did he return with any warrants or wants?
No.
Okay. And I'll publish, we'll play this next part, and if it refreshes your memory as to what specifically you did here, then I'll ask you about that.
Sure.
I had a black male immediately come out. He's watching me.
Hey. Hey guys, Major's en route to back him up. He's got a patrol car that can back him up so you don't blow your vehicle over here.
I'm gonna pause it right here at 125. It appears you just typed in the tag.
Yes, sir.
Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then what's the information displaying on your laptop right now?
Right now on the picture pause,
Yes.
It is all the units that are in service, and the bottom are the pending calls for service.
All right, resuming at 125.
Yeah, no, Beiju. I'm on the phone with Beiju. He's on his route. He's en route to back him up. Traffic unit just pulled in.
Pausing at 136. So it appears you're scrolling through some sort of information that's returned to you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, do you recall what specifically you were looking at there?
I do not recall specifically. The first one, just the way it's structured, looks like previous cases of previous officers that they've had. So, for instance, like unrelated to this stop, he was the victim of a theft. It'll say his information in parentheses, theft, victim, whatever, and like a very short, almost narrative. I believe based on just the structuring of that first page, that's what that is.
Okay.
Is either previous encounters or previous traffic stops or whatever. Each one will be listed. Obviously, there's a limit and it won't give all, but just from the way that that's structured, that's what it looks like. Is those are the previous encounters that are in our system.
With that tag.
So with that tag or anyone associated with that tag. So for instance, if Mr. Hernandez wasn't driving the vehicle, but Jane Doe was, that tag as well as Jane Doe's information would pop up, whether they were kind of related or not, if that makes sense.
Yep. Okay, resuming at 136.
That's what you think.
Hey guys, I'm out with Jose Hernandez Perez.
Pausing at 155. So it appears you're reading the layout of the printout there. Somewhere in there it says Jose Hernandez Perez is the registered owner of the tag you ran, correct?
Correct. So I'm running. So right now, what I'm doing is the returns that came back for the vehicle. I'm matching the information that's on the screen to the ID. So I'm looking back, looking back, just to make sure all the information is accurate and matches.
And resuming at 155.
Hold on one second. Let's pause. Why don't we take a 5-minute break? I want to give Ms. Rivers, who is invisibly taking down not what's on the video, but what you all are saying, a break, and we're going to transition interpreters. I apologize. I lost track of the time. So we'll transition interpreters, and at about 4:21 on the clock on the wall, we'll start back up with the continued cross-examination. Do you think, Mr. DeSardo, I'm not rushing you at all, that we'll finish 5-ish or?
I think so.
Okay, great. We're good. Deputy Gordon's fine. Thanks. I'll be right back.
I'm gonna step outside real quick. I'll be back.
Ms. Rivers, are you ready?
I am ready.
Excellent. Let's pick up where we left off, please.
All right, so Officer Cabrera, we last left off 157 on State's Exhibit 2. We were talking about the tasks being performed while you're in the patrol camera. So I'm going to resume at 157, and then I'll ask some questions.
Check on the north 3. Can you copy a phone call request?
So pausing at 2:14, it appears you're scrolling through your display and then you pivot over to, looks like an email, like an Outlook type thing. Do you recall what you were doing there in that time frame?
I do not specifically know.
Okay.
I don't know if the thing came up that I had an alert because I knew that they were still over in the area. And sometimes, you know, during traffic stops like this, they'll send pictures or more information via email if you're not answering a text or something like that. So I don't know if that was the case, but I can't say 100% for sure what I was doing in that instant.
All right, resuming at 2:14. All right, pausing at 2:27. So again, it looks like you're just moving your mouse over different tabs, but I didn't see anything on the screen actually change. Do you have any recollection as to what you were doing in those 11 seconds?
Yeah, so it looks on the bottom right that I don't have connectivity. And I believe in that moment, because backup hadn't arrived yet, I was wanting to look at the map, but I was waiting for the GPS to go green.
And so what?
So all of those scrollings, like when you go, it'll bring the unit number up and I could click on it because I know who's on the area and it'll show me where they're at on the map to see like how close, how far away of who's in the area. But I believe it wasn't working. It often gets disconnected where you have to wait 30 seconds, the computer refreshes, what have you. So I believe that that's what I was doing.
And what purpose was that? Just to see where your backup was, or were you trying to find out something?
Correct, to see where my backup was and to see who was responding. So another thing is like if you could see the unit numbers are on the far left. And then when you start getting towards the middle is when it'll say like who's responding and what's locating. That is not happening on the screen. So I know that people are going different places based off of the radio traffic, but it's not displaying. So I'm kind of scrolling, hoping it'll like unfreeze or something. That's typically what I do.
And why at that moment were you waiting for other units to arrive?
So while I was doing the research, or the researcher running his identification and all that as what would come back. So like those first screens where you saw me scrolling, I'm also watching him and his behavior. So while I'm in the car, I see him kind of pacing back and forth. I was already nervous because he immediately exited the vehicle. He's pacing back and forth. He's tapping on my car. He keeps looking in the direction of the vehicle, which that male was also standing there. That was also an unknown. I didn't know if they knew each other, if they didn't know each other, but he couldn't keep himself still. So I had an elevated level of nervousness based off of his behavior. So I'm kind of waiting before I go back out because I knew what I was going to ask him when I got out, which was if there were any drugs in the car, any weapons, anything of that nature. In my experience, that's typically kind of the spot where things, if they are going to go south, do go south. And based on his behavior, I could tell that he was very anxious, very nervous. So I was waiting for at least one additional officer. And while I'm watching him, I'm also out of my passenger side window. That male, the initial male on that traffic stop, is still kind of pacing back and forth. And he's coming into view. He's kind of leaving. I can't obviously address him because I've got Mr. Hernandez at the front, but I'm also watching out for that. So that's kind of where that delay is.
Okay. So you had run the information on Mr. Hernandez, but you were waiting a little bit longer to see if you could get backup based on your plan to question him about the drugs.
Correct.
Okay. Eventually, though, you get out of your vehicle and you begin your second interaction with Mr. Hernandez, correct?
Yes.
All right, I'll play that part beginning at 2:27.
Ok, señor, algo que yo pregunto por todos que yo paro, es si usted tiene armas en el carro, ok, drogas, ok, dinero, algo más de dinero.
Okay, so right there you asked him, okay, sir, something that I always ask when I do a stop, are there any firearms in the car, drugs, money? And he says no to each, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that was a stop at 245, resuming 245.
Okay. ¿Puedo hacer un busco para chequear?
No, pero ¿por qué me está parando entonces?
Okay.
And pausing at 252. So you asked him, can I do a search to check? And he said, no. Well, why are you stopping me then? Correct?
Yes.
Okay. And again, that's all, this interaction's been in Spanish, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then from there, you begin to tell him about what you would observe with his seatbelt, and he's arguing with you that he had it on, and you guys are going back and forth in Spanish, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm gonna play that part, beginning 252.
Que usted no tenía su cinturón y...
Yo el cinturón yo lo traigo, ¿no? Yo me lo acabo de quitar, oficial.
Ok. En el carro usted no tenía el
Sí, yo
cinturón.
lo traigo, en serio. Se lo prometo.
No, yo estaba detrás de usted. Y usted no sacaste cuando usted parqueó.
¿Cómo no me parqué?
No, usted parquea, pero
Sí.
usted no tenía su cinturón.
Sí, yo lo traigo, oficial.
Okay.
All right, and pausing at 322, so you say, well, because you didn't have your seatbelt. And he says, I'm sure I had it on, I just took it off, officer. You said, okay, you didn't have it on the road. He says, yes, I did have it, seriously, I promise. You said, I was behind you and you didn't take it off when you parked. He asks you, how did I not park? You said, yes, you parked, but you did not have your seatbelt on. He said, yes, I did have it on, officer. And then you said, okay, and began walking back to your car, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we're now at 322. And at this point in time, you have some officers arrive. Is that correct?
Yes.
You recall their names?
Officer Davis is the female, and the second officer in the blue shirt is Officer Beju.
Okay.
How would you spell that?
Begue, I believe.
Okay. And so now what's your plan? I think next that you go ahead and you're going to ultimately retrieve your canine and do a free air sniff. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
When did we already have it, or is there not? You mentioned Mr. Hernandez said you may not search my car.
Correct.
That's already
that just
happened? Okay.
And so it appears that, and we'll play it, but at 322, you get back in your vehicle, look at the license, put it down, and then you get out of your car to get your canine. So I'm gonna play that part and just correct me if I have that wrong. 322.
Hey, can you just watch him real quick?
Did I have that right? You went in there, you put the license down and you're going to get your canine?
Yes.
Okay. All right. 344. All right, I'm pausing it at 408. And in the background there are those the two officers that you just described standing by with the defendant?
Yes.
Okay. All right, resuming 408. Okay, you had testified earlier about, there was a question about why my client was placed into handcuffs, and you had speculated that there was an officer that had worked with you before that may have saw the dog alert, and that's why they made that decision?
No, the speculation on my part is just solely based on the dash cam video, because they're going back and forth. And as you can see, when I put my dog in the back of the truck, I cannot see what's going on in the front of my vehicle. So That speculation was solely based off of the front dash cam video. It is possible, because of the dog's reaction, that is something, having worked with both of those officers before, having run my dog before, that they could have anticipated as common practice. Hey, we're going to detain this person based off of the canine. But I can't say assuredly why ultimately he was placed in handcuffs, because when I come back around the vehicle and I say, hey, positive alert, that's the first that me as the canine handler is verbally telling them of the positive alert, but he's already in handcuffs.
Okay, so these two officers that are standing by with my client, are either of them trained canine officers?
No.
Okay, you had been trained with Falco?
Yes.
Okay, and so when ultimately, you talked about alerts and final alerts, where ultimately does Falco alert on this vehicle?
So it's alert and final sit indication.
Okay.
So the alert is an alert. There's no such thing as a final alert. It's the behavior change within the dog. So it's a lot of different things: the heavy breathing, the tail wagging, what we call a head snap, where they're passing something and immediately they snap back to get into the scent cone. So he actually does it very clearly twice in this video, once on the driver's side and then again on this rear passenger side. The driver's side, when he goes into his final sit indication, you can see him going to sit down. That is what I would call handler error, because as he's trying to give me a final sit indication, I'm still pulling on his leash. And of course, he's going to go where I'm pulling him to go. So I pulled him out of that final sit indication, but I did still observe his alert to the vehicle, which was the behavior change and him transitioning to that final sit indication.
Okay, and resuming at 4:30.
Hold on.
Pausing it at 4:48, you'd acknowledge that we can see that my client has already been handcuffed behind his back, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Sir.
Resuming at 4:48.
You could search him as a positive alert.
Okay, pausing at 4:52, you tell the officers you can search, it's a positive alert, correct?
Correct.
So what basis at that moment did you have to search the person of my client?
I said, you can search like the vehicle.
So the two officers?
Correct. Both of them didn't have to be with him.
So your testimony is that was you telling the other two officers that they could search the defendant's vehicle?
Correct.
And did they?
I believe Officer Beju left and assisted me in the search. Yeah.
We'll resume at 4:52.
Before you resume or stopping, why wouldn't they, the question for a lawyer, why wouldn't they have a basis to search Mr. Hernandez right then, because he's now under arrest because of the discovery of drugs in his car?
Well, they hadn't discovered drugs yet, Judge. They had only had
Oh, right. There was just the alert. I'm sorry, I got it backwards. There was the alert on the car. And so there's probable cause to search the car, not necessarily the driver of the car. Yep.
Pausing here at 5:13, can we see here that my client, his hat has been removed. The officer also appears to be removing his lanyard with his keys on it this time?
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, Beju, can you open the car when you get his keys?
So 6:15, pausing at 6:15, that you had just found the drugs in the defendant's vehicle, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you acknowledge you were the only officer actually searching his vehicle, correct?
Up until this point, yes, sir. Yeah.
And meanwhile, you acknowledge that both the other two officers, while you're searching the defendant's vehicle, have placed him in custody and are searching his person, correct?
Correct. But I also had no idea, and I also had no interaction with them as to why he was in handcuffs.
You did say the words verbatim, "You're good to search." It's a positive alert. You said those exact words, correct?
Correct. My dog did not search his person. He searched the vehicle. So when I indicated positive alert, you can search, it is what my dog alerted to. You'd have to ask those officers why, because again, if you watch the dash cam, and this is, I have not reviewed this before and I haven't talked to the officers, but it almost looks like they get into a little tussle.
Speculating what the other officers.
But you're asking him why they handcuffed him, and you've given him an answer, which was because you told them to, and this officer has said, I didn't. I don't give them orders. They don't work for me. I said, you're good to search the vehicle.
Respectfully, Judge, my question was regarding the words that he said to the other officers. He's kind of gone off on a tangent on something else that I didn't ask about. And so that's the basis of my objection is I'm asking a question about the actual words that he said to the other officers. I didn't ask him to speculate why the other officers made that decision. And
Okay.
That's my question.
Well, let's move on. We've covered this.
All right. Resuming at 6:15.
He's in custody now. Okay. He's under arrest.
All right. And now at 6:18, you're instructing the other officers that he is in custody, referring to my client, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. At any point in time to now, had you issued any sort of or began working on any sort of citation for the traffic violation?
No, I personally had not. No.
Did you direct any other officer on scene to do that?
No.
Okay. The two officers that were present assisting you, their purpose on scene was to watch the defendant while you were doing your thing, searching the vehicle, running the dog around the vehicle, correct?
Correct. Yes.
It was more than watch. It was to your safety, maintain the situation, make sure Mr. Hernandez doesn't go. It's not just to spectate.
Correct. It's to assist in any way possible. So whether that's watching Mr. Hernandez, also watching because I did call out with that male being there. So kind of just provide me that 360 coverage and protect innocent parties. I can't tell you the amount of people when I have my dog come out, will try and walk up and be near the dog. He is an apprehension dog. That could be obviously a volatile situation. So it kind of encompasses every aspect of that stop.
But I guess I meant more specifically, you didn't instruct those officers to conduct any tasks attendant to the failure to maintain lane or seatbelt violation, correct?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, and then just to, for the record, go back to states one very briefly. Fast forward. Publish the portion beginning at 6:12 states one, and ask you a question.
Looks like there's a tenant.
No, 120, we're code terminator.
Oh, 130. You can show 140, correction, 120 code 9. Yeah, that's excellent. 239.
All right, and pausing at 7:36. This is immediately after you discovered the drugs in the defendant's vehicle, and you indicate to them now he's in custody. I found the drugs.
Yes, I indicate to them after I find the drugs and I'm walking back that, hey, the subject is now in custody. He's under arrest.
Okay. All right. I think those are all the questions. Let me just double check. That's all I've got, Judge. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Jordan, do you have any redirect for Officer Cabrera?
No redirect, Your Honor.
All right, may Officer Cabrera step down?
Yes, Your Honor.
Great. So you're excused for today? No, you're not excused.
I was gonna just offer something. From the defense perspective, we're comfortable proceeding without Officer Cabrera's report.
Okay.
But the state is, I don't believe, based on his response on the seatbelt failure to maintain lane issue, that was really more what I was interested in. Given that I don't think that that's going to be an issue, I'm comfortable closing evidence and arguing.
Great. That really would inure to your benefit if you wanted the report. If you don't, then we'll close out the evidence, and I can tell you we won't bring you back for any more suppression. If there's a trial, you need to come back, but otherwise, appreciate your time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, then evidence is closed. And I'm happy to hear argument, or if people want to brief it, whatever the preference is. I am here, and there's not a rush.
You mentioned 5 o'clock, Judge. I don't know if we had an issue.
I just wanted to know 5-ish. I don't have a hard stop. I mean, we can't go till 5:30. We'll also wear out interpreter number 2, and Ms. Rivers needs to go. But if people each have 5 to 10 minutes of argument, I'm happy to hear that. But I also don't mind if people want to put it in writing. So why don't you tell me, Mr. DiTardo, as I know you're the movant here, and so while the state has the burden, you're the one who's going to be poking holes based on what you've heard and seen.
Sure. I'm comfortable arguing. And,
Okay, let's do that.
Okay.
Would you like the state to proceed, Your Honor?
Yeah, you can tell me why you think what happened was constitutionally sound, and then I'll hear the contrary view.
All right. And Your Honor, I printed out I apologize, Attorney Tartar, I scribbled on the top of that one.
Yeah, of course.
Case being Hall v. State, and I have a copy for Your Honor as well. If I may approach, Your Honor.
You may. Sure. Hall versus State, 351 Georgia Appeals 695.
Yes, Your Honor. I do believe that this particular case it's not exactly on point, as it does have a few differences, but the main crux of Hall v. State is very close to the state's argument here. First, I believe that the state has carried its burden in providing that the traffic stop was legal, given Officer Cabrera's testimony that he did observe the failure to maintain lane violation. I understand the defense's argument about it perhaps not being quite crystal clear on the dash cam, but I do believe that Officer Cabrera's testimony that the center location of the dash cam may have contributed to why it is not extremely visible in the video. Furthermore, Your Honor, his testimony would go to weight and not admissibility of the testimony that he witnessed the traffic violation. Defense is more than welcome, as they've done so eloquently during this motion to suppress, to be able to attack Officer Cabrera's credibility as far as whether he viewed this particular traffic violation or not. So we would stand on the testimony of Officer Cabrera that he did witness that traffic violation. Furthermore, Your Honor, we would argue that per the collective knowledge doctrine, given that Detective Rennell's over the dispatch radio had already stated that he believed that the driver was engaged in illegal activity, even if Your Honor was to find that the traffic stop itself was not legal, I do believe that there was reasonable articulable suspicion to detain Mr. Hernandez Perez further, given that information. Furthermore, Your Honor, Detective Rennell's actually, as he testified, actually witnessed Mr. Hernandez place that bag into his Toyota RAV4. The case here, that's where Hall v. State comes in. It itself was based on surveillance that officers had done, the collective knowledge of those officers communicating to other officers that they had seen the defendant in that case engage in illegal activity centered around narcotics. It's slightly different from our case, Your Honor, before you today, as you'll see in that particular case, that there are, they witnessed the individual do several drug deals as opposed to walking out with the plastic bag in this situation.
Which version of events do you credit? We have one version of events of Mr. Hernandez coming out of 106 with the bag in his hand. He puts it in the back of his car and drives away. We have a second version of events, not firsthand, of no.
Judge?
Ms. Rivers, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can.
Great. We're only going to have the podium camera, so if you need to be seen for some reason, come to the podium. I had asked you which of the two versions of events Mr. Hernandez comes out by himself with his white bag and puts it in the car and drives away versus a hand-to-hand transaction.
The state would defer to Detective Reynolds' version of events, Your Honor, and we do understand about that conflict in information, but given what's contained on the police report and Detective Reynolds, who was actually the individual that saw Mr. Hernandez exit from his apartment, we would defer to Detective Reynolds' version of events.
Okay.
And to wrap up quickly, Your Honor, because I do believe that Hall v. State is pretty much spot on. The traffic stop here was not unduly extended. Hall v. State does mention that it took 15 minutes because the officer that initiated the traffic stop was not an actual canine officer. Of course, in our case, the actual individual that pulled over Mr. Hernandez was a canine handler. I believe that, and I know that defense mentioned that there was a small portion in which the body camera didn't catch the initial interaction, but at least by my count of both videos, the interaction could not have lasted longer than about 8 minutes, I believe, in between Mr. Hernandez being approached by canine handler Cabrera and ultimately the arrest. My count was about 9 minutes. There was no time that was extended to get the canine there. Canine was already present at the scene. If anything, time was extended so that Officer Cabrera could be safe at the scene so that he could have his backup officer there. Your Honor, the state would contend that the stop was not unduly extended. No constitutional rights were violated for that prong. We would maintain that the traffic stop was legal, given Officer Cabrera's testimony that he viewed a traffic infraction. We would maintain that the search of the vehicle was legal, given the positive alert of K9 Falco. And we would ask, Your Honor, that the motion to suppress be denied based off of those reasons.
Was there anything seized from Mr. Hernandez directly that you would use at trial?
I do not believe so. I believe his phone may have been seized, but we've already worked through that issue with the phone extraction. I sent that to defense counsel. Nothing fruitful was gained from the phone extraction, so the state would not move to use anything that was seized from his person.
Okay. Mr. DiTardo.
Thank you, Judge. As sort of a preliminary matter, I want to point out the big differences that we've got here between the Hall case that the state has provided and the facts that we have in this case. It appears, as I was reading as I was listening to the state argue, but in the Hall case, we have an extensive investigation into Mr. Hall. We have information from a reliable informant regarding Mr. Hall's activities. There appears to have been something substantially more in terms of suspecting Mr. Hall was trafficking drugs more than what we have in this case, which is.
As I understand, in this case, we have a tip, uncorroborated. We know nothing about the tipster, that says taxi driver with this phone number, traffics meth, and maybe the street name.
Right.
They figure out through the phone number, your client's address and name, and one surveillance shows that in fact the taxi is parked in front of it.
Correct.
And then we've got this incident where someone walks out of the house with a bag that could have anything that would fit in a bag in it. And then he's off and running.
Correct.
I think I'll have to read Hall that the only proper basis for a stop at this point would be a traffic violation and not, hey, a guy with, and maybe it was recognized that it was Mr. Hernandez because maybe Rennell's saw a photo through his work at driver's license, and clearly he had a Georgia driver's license. So my guess is he did see a Georgia driver's license photo, but that simply shows that's the Hernandez about which we have only a tip.
Correct.
And some corroboration. He lives in this, well, it's not corroborating the tip. The phone number is connected to him. The evidence of any illegal activity would be carrying a white bag out of the house.
Correct.
Okay.
We have no evidence about who
No
gave
prior
us
drug
tips,
transactions.
how reliable this, whether this was a reliable informant. There was no predictive behavior detailed by this tip. We don't even have evidence, Judge, of that number in fact belonged to my client. We don't even have evidence of that. So nothing about this tip really was confirmed. And so the issue that we've got, as Your Honor's pointed out, is was there probable cause to stop the vehicle? And we're obviously going to argue that's a credibility issue for the court to determine. My client maintains he did not fail to maintain his lane, as you can see from the evidence, that he did have his seatbelt on. He was arguing with the officer about that. I would point out that I asked Detective Reynolds about that, whether he observed any traffic violations committed by my client when he saw him leave. He said no. He didn't say, well, I saw him not wearing a seatbelt, which seems to me like the first thing you might notice if somebody, if you were suspecting someone was trafficking drugs, right? I just saw him leave the complex. He's not wearing a seatbelt. You can light him up now, right? Had that been the evidence, I think that would be in a stronger position. And I don't ever want to sit up here and call an officer a liar. But I do believe that sometimes officers believe the ends justify the means in terms of their drug investigations. These are terrible things that are put out onto the street, and they result in a lot of people dying. They result in addiction. And so I do believe that there are a number of officers who believe the violation of a couple constitutional rights here and there ultimately doesn't matter as much as getting the poison off the streets. And I kind of understand that perspective, but of course, that's not how the law works. And I think that that's what we had in this situation, respectfully.
Well, I hear where you're coming from and appreciate that. And I work in the same space you do. We have in real time, Officer Cabrera saying, you didn't have a seatbelt on. Before his dog alerted, sure. Before he found the blue bag inside the white bag that had all the drugs. So that cuts a little bit against, we need to now go back to you following him and come up with a reason for the blue lights.
So I agree, Judge, that fact would lend in favor of the state in terms of that violation actually happened. I would point out, though, that it seems relevant to me that fact that my client was not wearing a seatbelt was apparently never relayed to Officer or Detective Reynolds. The bigger issue, though, here, Judge, is not that. Obviously, if you don't think that there is probable cause for the traffic stop, we're done. The bigger issue here is that the purpose of the stop was either failure to maintain lane or failure to wear a seatbelt, or maybe, as Your Honor pointed out, fail to use your turn signal when you're turning into the strip mall.
Which, to be clear, Cabrera never said anything about that. So my observation doesn't give him probable cause that he is not articulating.
It doesn't. The biggest issue that we have, and I think that ultimately the winning issue here for us, is this officer, Officer Cabrera, completed no tasks attendant to the purpose of the stop, which was either failure to maintain lane or failure to wear a seatbelt. I was very meticulous in how I went through the officer's actions from the time that he encountered my client until ultimately he indicated he was in custody and under arrest. Other than running the tag of my client, which he indicated came back to his name, I was also very clear in asking whether, while he was waiting for these other backup officers to arrive, whether there was any other information that he was waiting for. He said he was not. The only thing that he was waiting for at the moment that he emerged from his vehicle the first time was he was looking for his map to work because he wanted to know where those backup officers were. He hadn't run the DOB or driver's license of my client and was waiting for a return to see if there were any warrants. He hadn't started writing the citation or a warning if he wanted to go that route. He was doing absolutely nothing related to the actual purpose of the stop. Instead, he launched into this drug investigation.
You say launched into, it was an extension of a drug investigation.
Yes, that's probably a better way of putting it. His involvement regarding the drug investigation began at that moment, I guess, because there had been surveillance going on. But his involvement in it began at that moment. And the only thing that he knew, and I asked him, what basis did you have to launch into that or to continue on with that? And he said that in his opinion, the defendant was nervous and that he found it unusual that my client decided to walk out of his vehicle and, I guess meet him or greet him or walk up to him. Respectfully, Your Honor is aware, I don't think I need to cite to you the number of cases that indicate nervousness alone is not sufficient to create, certainly not probable cause, but not even reasonable articulable suspicion that there's some crime afoot. There had to have been something else going on, more than just nervousness. And I will respectfully disagree with the officer that when somebody pulls into a traffic stop in a strip mall in the middle of the day and gets out of his vehicle, that's any indication of illegal activity. That's what every single person who pulls into a strip mall and lawfully parks into a spot does. Now, I understand the officer's perspective that I'd rather that he sit in the car, but he wasn't commanded to sit in the car. And I'm unaware of any law that would require that he, because he's being blue lighted, would require him to stand in his vehicle.
He's not, but I thought that what Officer Cabrera's testimony was that this was, as he's listing the reasons why he's getting concerned or intrigued by what he's encountering, there is the nervousness. And I will say, Mr. Hernandez was doing a whole lot of fidgeting, moving, et cetera, when he's at the front of the car before other officers showed up. But as to getting out of the car, you pressed Cabrera on that. And he said, never, other than bailers, people who are jumping out and running, when I have pulled behind someone with blue lights on in a strip mall where I like to pull people over, has someone gotten out and come towards me? Never. He said, this was the time. So is that proof of a crime? I'm not saying it is. I just think that it is actually a factor for him to consider, because in his mind, that was unique to this case. Am I misremembering his testimony?
That was his testimony. You're right on that.
Okay.
What we're arguing is that it's not Officer Cabrera's subjective experience that controls the day.
Okay.
It's, would a reasonable person in that situation believe that, oh, this guy is getting out of his car and standing near his bumper and waving at me, which I would argue in a very friendly way he was waving at him, not shaking his fist, not, taking out his cell phone and filming him. I mean, he was being friendly. That would not get him to reasonable articulable suspicion. And the reason why that's important, Judge, is because that's what the state has to establish to justify the prolonging of the stop. I have some cases for the court, if I may approach.
Sure.
And the one I cited in my brief is the one I will mainly focus on. That's State versus Allen.
Thank you.
And the citation is 298 GA1. That is a 2015 Supreme Court case. And ultimately in Allen, this was a situation where there was a traffic violation that was observed. The officers encounter Mr. Allen and his passenger. Ultimately, they are denied consent to search. The officer asked for consent to search the vehicle. They were denied that. The officer retrieves his dog and begins a free air sniff around the stopped vehicle. Less than a minute later, Officer Jackson puts the dog away and informs Scott and Allen that the dog had alerted for the presence of drugs, meaning that he had probable cause to search the vehicle. At this point, Scott and Allen had been stopped for about 11 and a half minutes. About 3 minutes later, while the officer was conducting the search of the car, the dispatcher reported back that Allen's South Carolina ID card was clear. And Officer Jackson continued the search, found 9.5 pounds of marijuana, and arrested them both. So the issue in Allen was the officer doing something attendant to the stop that would justify that prolonging of the stop to run the dog around the vehicle? And in Allen's case, the Supreme Court ultimately held that yes, running a passenger's identification was enough. That was enough. But we don't have that in this case, because I think the evidence is very clear that this officer was doing nothing. Officer Cabrera was doing nothing whatsoever attendant to the purpose of this stop to justify the free air sniff of the dog. And the state may argue, well, to the extent that they were delayed, it was only a few minutes. And Allen talks about that issue specifically. It says, a dog sniff of a traffic stop vehicle is not fairly characterized as part of the officer's traffic mission because it is a measure aimed at detecting evidence of ordinary criminal wrongdoing. Consequently, prolonging a traffic stop in order to conduct an open air dog sniff renders the seizure unlawful, even if that process adds very little time to the stop. Rejecting the government's argument that a dog sniff may incrementally prolong a stop as long as the overall duration of the stop remains reasonable. The Supreme Court has clearly held, however, that conducting an open air dog sniff around a vehicle during a traffic stop does not itself violate the Fourth Amendment. And like all other investigation unrelated to the stop, it can be lawfully done so long as it does not lengthen the stop at all. And I think unquestionably in this case, the free air sniff of my client's vehicle lengthened the duration of the stop. So I believe that State versus Allen is a case that is directly on point to the facts that we have here. As your honors pointed out, nothing about this tip or the surveillance of my client would have given Officer Cabrera enough to get to RAS. And we reject the idea that nervousness alone and the fact that he, unlike everybody else that Officer Cabrera had ever stopped, got out of the vehicle, that in and of itself was enough. I've got a number of other cases, Judge, as it relates to the reliability of the informant. I think your honor and I are on the same page on that issue. The canine sniff, respectfully, the testimony that I heard, and I may have heard it incorrectly, was, all these different things that the dog does could be an indication that there's drugs in the vehicle. It sounded like he described basically everything that a dog could possibly do. But I understand the state of the case law, Judge, and I understand that right now it is what it is, but we are just, for the record, objecting on the basis that we don't believe that the canine sniff alone, given the evidence that we heard, was sufficient probable cause to search the vehicle. The other issue that we have that I don't think you need reach, if you agree with us on the unreasonably prolonged argument, is that unquestionably my client was detained and searched prior to there being any drugs discovered in the actual vehicle. I don't have a case for your honor that says that if a defendant's person is searched illegally without probable cause, that would somehow eliminate, or that would be the fruit of the poisonous tree argument would arise from stuff found in the vehicle.
Right. Unless that was the way they figured out that was his car or something. Right. I mean, I could see where something they got off of Mr. Hernandez was the only thing that led them to the car, that they then open air sniff, which they'd then be able to do because assuming but if he was lawfully arrested, they could search him.
Right.
Here, he was only being detained. We've had some speculation that maybe he was too fidgety with his hands and that's why they did it. That's not sufficient to explain why he was handcuffed. But I did ask Mr. Jordan, and it doesn't sound like there was anything seized. I think it would be inevitable discovery anyway for what was seized from him, unless what was seized from him facilitated the discovery of the car. I do know that Bajou pressed the button to unlock the door, right, but all that meant was that they didn't break his window to get in there because the dog had already alerted. So I saw you getting traction with that, but like you, I'm wondering what the so what is of that one.
I think it goes more to the overall issue that we have here, which was that, simply put, they had a hunch. They had a hunch and they didn't have more than a hunch. And the purpose here was to find drugs or to find out if there were drugs, and they cut corners, and the Fourth Amendment doesn't allow them to do that.
No corner cutting. Let me ask this. I will read Allen, but the way I've understood your interpretation of Allen, if Officer Davis, the female officer, if the way this had played out was Officer Cabrera said, "Hey, Officer Davis, here's Mr. Hernandez's license. Can you go run it?"
Yep.
And she walks off to her car and she's running it. That frees up Cabrera to say, "I'm going to walk my dog around the RAV4." And the dog does what it does, and he interprets that as an alert. He now has probable cause to search the car.
Yep.
And so there's a whole nother reason to extend their interaction, because that open air search had occurred while some step was being taken to further the investigation of the basis for the traffic stop, which was failure to maintain lane, maybe seatbelt violation. They're entitled to run his tag. He did do that. They're entitled to run his license. He didn't do that. But if Davis had been doing that, and that's when Falco had his alert, the state's in the clear here. But that's not the sequence of events as you mapped out. The only person who was doing anything to investigate the failure to maintain lane was Cabrera, and his one step was to run the tag, which confirmed the name, and then he's on the radio saying, "Hey, I've got a Jose Hernandez here." And then he's asking for consent to search, doesn't get it, walks the dog around, but he ceased furthering the investigation into the traffic stop. Other than in his mind, the traffic stop is also predicated on there was a hand-to-hand transaction kind of thing.
Correct.
Okay.
You're 100% right, Judge. And so, and because they don't have that fact, the only way the prolonging of the stop would be saved is if there existed or there in the intervening circumstances, there arose RAS. Something happened after he blue lighted the defendant and before the search occurred that would justify it.
Right. And that's the nervousness. And your point is that's not enough.
Correct. And just 3 cases to cite to the court regarding that issue.
About the nervousness?
Nervousness is not enough. Yeah. Nervousness plus some other stuff. Miglior versus State, that's 240 GA app 783. Their nervousness and inconsistent statements regarding where they were going, that was not enough. State versus Blair 239 GA app 340. There again, nervousness was not enough to justify the search for drugs. And 223 GA app 781, that's Simmons versus State. Again, a situation where there was nervousness and some unusual behavior that the officer observed that was not sufficient to create RAS. So Judge, for those reasons, we don't believe that the state has produced evidence that would justify that prolonging of the stop. And again, it doesn't matter that it was only a minute or 2 or 3 minutes. The Supreme Court in State versus Allen, and I think there's also a United States Supreme Court case in the issue. I want to say Rodriguez, but there's some other case that addressed that issue, and that's not what happened here. This search and the evidence seized from my client's vehicle should be suppressed, respectfully.
All right. Mr. Jordan, anything you want to say in rebuttal? You get to sort of open and close since you've got the burden here.
No, Your Honor. Well, actually, Your Honor, very, very briefly, I think State v. Allen, and I understand what the court has already stated about the reasonable articulable suspicion. I would just say that it's like that our case before us today is different given the information, and I do understand that, and I spoke to Detective Reynolds about this prior to the hearing, about the veracity of the confidential informant. But I do think that the factor that a confidential informant had said that a taxi cab was trafficking, and also the fact that he surveilled him on 2 separate dates and then saw him with the suspected bag of drugs differs the case before us today from State v. Allen, which just sounds like it may have been a traffic stop that resulted in drugs. So we do at least have a predicating factor here that the state would just ask that Your Honor consider when considering this motion to suppress, that the officers did have that within their collective knowledge when they stopped Mr. Hernandez. Got it.
Okay. Well, I want to thank both of you. I want to thank our interpreter team and Ms. Rivers for working late. We'll wrap this up now. I will take this under advisement and get an order out, letting you all know which way things are going next. All right? Appreciate it.
Okay, Judge.
Thank you, ma'am.
All righty.
Bye.